Welcome to Warcraft Reloaded, a podcast brought to you by Mash Those Buttons, covering World of Warcraft Classic and its community. I am Bobby, also known as Blazin' Bob, and I'm joined once again by Mel, aka Melarina. How you doing?
Hi, I'm good.
Good. Okay. Well, good. Good to hear. And then we're also joined, second time on the show, I believe, North the Mage. How you doing?
I'm doing really well. Thanks for having me on again.
Thanks for coming. I know you didn't want to get out of bed, but you did it for us.
No, I wanted to get out of bed. I had shit to do today, but then I realized my family's coming home from a little later than I thought tomorrow. So I was like, ooh, I get to sleep in a little bit. I don't have to Cinderella, scrub the house down until tomorrow. So got a bit of a late start. A little later than we would have liked, but Zadar was having my problems. It all works out.
Wait, because you were staying there to watch the house, right? The last time you were on Countdown to Classic.
Was I?
Because the cat turned on your light and you got scared.
Oh yeah.
Or not scared. You got concerned.
They were gone for a day or two. They were visiting my grandmother. She was getting some surgery done on her knee. So they were just down a town or two, but yeah, I was all alone, and they're fucking, the cat fucking kept turning on the motion sensor, and I thought that I'd turned it off, but either the cat turned it back. Anyway, it's not very important, but yes, the cat scared the piss out of me.
Right, and I think third time on the show, Zatar, how you doing?
Yep, this is my third time on. Doing good.
Nice,
glad to be here.
Glad to have you. Glad to have two of these great minds here on the show. Guys, we're going to start out the show. I'd like to thank all of our patrons in Thick Lizzie, Croxford, Braxton, and Turtle Whale. I'd like to mention we do stream the show live at twitch.tv/BlazinBob. That's BLAZZINBOB. We have a new Discord server. If you guys want to join that, it's discord.me/. discord.me/Warcraft Reloaded. Jeez, I forgot. Something like that. Just go to warcraftreloaded.com. You'll find it there. We're going to go over, we had one email and one voicemail for the show this week. We're going to go over those. Then we're going to hit what we've been doing lately. It might not even be WoW. Might start with a D, but I don't know. Then we're going to do the just a little bit of news. And then I thought we'd have a fun little talk about the state of Wrath of the Lich King. So first off, the voicemail I'm going to save to start off our conversation on the current state of Wrath of the Lich King. I think it'll go well to kind of get that conversation started. So I'm going to skip that. And we got an email this week, and normally I have Mel read these, but I thought it would be pretty funny if I read this one, because it's poking a little bit of fun at me, and rightfully so. So
I'm really good at poking fun at you, though. I feel like it would be an epic way for me to, I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
Well, I'm gonna try to capture his fervor, I guess you should say. So we'll see. This might be really bad, or it might be really good.
My guild leader cannot pronounce that word. How
fervor?
Sarah in phase 1 of Yogg, she casts fervor. He says fever. And now and people pointed it out to him when he was like, "Oh, yeah, this guy's got fever," and people were like, "You should just go with fever if you're not going to say fervor." But it's fervor, my guy. And now he just keeps. He's one of those people. He's not gonna. He's gonna be corrected. He's like, "Nope, now I'm saying that forever."
That's how I am with side real essence. People made fun of me, and I was like, fine.
I don't even know if you're wrong. It's Sidreal, side real. It's a fucking. I don't even. Is that even a word? Let's be real. I've never heard that shit used in English. So.
I think it's supposed to be sidereal, but it looks a whole lot like side real, so that's why we called it that, and it just makes people angry. So That's always fun too.
Oh, Sidereal time. Sidereal? Is it sidereal?
I think it's sidereal.
Sidereal is a system of timekeeping used by astronomers. Ooh, how interesting. That makes sense because you're trying to get Algalon loot with it. Ooh, clever.
Oh, all right,
That is a word. It is a word.
Okay, that is more clever than I thought now. Now I kind of feel bad for making fun of it. All right, well, here. I'm going to read this. This comes in from Pyrulin, Paladin from Pagel. Bobby,
what kind of paladin is really crucial, though? I'm just saying, Maybe we'll find out.
All right, I'm going to try this again.
You go.
See, now I'm all nervous, Mel. All right, Bobby, it's time we had to talk about your loathing of paladins. You go on and on about how people can play hardcore their way, but the Kargos way is better and harder. Yet you sit on a throne of lies. Harder? A rogue in hardcore? Vanish on cooldown? Just better log to be safe. And on a 5-minute cooldown? But it can fail you say. What then of prep? Of blind? Of gouge? The unlimited tool set? What does solo self-found matter when a rogue can solo 260 with a level 5 gray dagger? A paladin can only escape death once an hour, but you rogues, you never have to pay except for your own negligence. But I blither on, fine. Have your wish, but the monkey's paw curls. Paladins cannot bubble hearth, but only because Hearthstones have been removed from hardcore servers. Enjoy exploring the caverns of Azeroth all the way in and all the way back out.
Oh my God.
Oh, then he says then he writes, he just tried to give me some shit and wants us to have a little talk about what we think about not having Hearthstones on hardcore servers. I thought that was a pretty cool little talking thing. So I don't know how much hardcore you guys play, but who wants to go?
No.
I got a 60 hardcore rogue.
Nice. Me too.
Oh.
Me too.
A rogue.
Shout
figures.
out.
Yeah.
I will admit to our emailer here that I do think
you think not having it would be a horrible idea?
Yes.
I think it's actually an interesting idea.
I'm not
sure if
really
it's good or bad. I'm not really vested. Like I'll be honest, like I think hardcore is cool, but I'm not like, I'm not super into it. Like I'll play when the servers come out because it's fun. But I'm not like the purity of it is not like, it's not like the purest expression of World of Warcraft. I don't really, I'm not obsessed with it. So I think that actually would be cool. Then again, I always play Mage, so right, like I have my biases, right? Because I'm like, wow, if you take away my portals, I'll fucking kill myself. But like, realistically, right. If the other plebs can't Hearth, I'm fine with that. Right?
Yeah, right. I was like, if I was a mage, I might be okay with not having a Hearthstone.
Yeah, it seems like an interesting idea, though. I don't know how good in practice, because I think in reality, a lot of transportation, especially in the old world, I think. If you were going off even like a Wrath style, like in terms of how the quest progression worked in Wrath, it actually would work fine. But in vanilla, think about like going from Loch Medan to Darkshore and then wanting to get your Hearth back. You're not adding that much depth. You're literally just making it take an extra like hour for no reason.
Right.
Yeah, well, it came up because I said that paladins shouldn't be allowed to bubble hearth, or you can't hearth while bubbles on, but then Scotty J pointed out to me last week on the show that you don't get a long enough bubble until like the late 40s to actually truly bubble hearth. And that's something I didn't know. But honestly, still the problem comes in at the end game. And like, is my pally going to just bubble hearth out at the first sign of danger in the dungeon, and then we don't have a healer? Like, that's the part that just is like...
Same as said about the rogues. Every time shit goes down, the rogue vanishes and is like, waits there for a couple seconds until he decides if he's going to come out and help or not.
Well, that's how I died in like my last character in hardcore. We were, to be fair, we were 2 levels below Arugel, and we were 4 manning Arugel without a tank in Shadowfang Keep. Because I don't know, I play enough WoW where I'm realistically not going to die unless I get up to dumb bullshit. So we were up to dumb bullshit, and we killed him. We killed Arugel still, but the rogue stopped DPSing at one point because the hunter died, and he vanished, and he started to hearth. And then he stopped and he started killing the boss again. But I died to the final Shadow Bolt. Also, because my healer didn't lay me, I blinked away from the Shadow Bolt to give him more time to try and heal me as it was in the air, and he didn't heal me. And the Shadow Bolt wouldn't have gone off. It wouldn't have gone off had he just been DPSing the fucking boss.
Yep.
So I'm
Cowards.
pissed. Yeah.
Yeah,
it's rogue fantasy though. You can't take their fantasy from them. Being bitch boys is literally it's part of the class. So, realistically, we gotta hand them that.
I might just be the only honorable rogue. I mean, I would use Vanish in dungeons to like
one of the good ones, not all
to like
rogues.
CC. Like I used both of my Vanishes to save a wipe in Moradon on the rogue that eventually hit 60. But that was my heart was thumping. Oh my God. We took on like 3 of those things that have the AoE knock down the flowers. And we were just getting knocked down constantly. The tank got bopped at like 1% health. Like I was like crowd controlling. The warlock was like fearing. I mean, it was a wild night. I think people want to talk about other classes and their like ability to be safe. Obviously, I think that people overlook. I don't know why people never talk about Mage when they bitch about. They're like, ooh, rogue with Vanish. Ooh, like like Paladin with Bubble. Obviously, if you're allowed to use Bubble in the rule set, it's definitely the most OP thing if something goes wrong. But especially in raids. But for everything other than raids, Mage can literally just Nova shit, blink away, and hearth, or they can just walk out of the dungeon because they're faster than most mobs because most shit's slowable. Yep. So it's like, how do you? That's my thing, right? Obviously, if you're not paying attention, and it can be hard to go for long periods of time and grind your character while paying attention. I get that. That's the challenge of hardcore, right? It's like always being present. But if you're playing a mage, even if you're doing heinous bullshit, right? Realistically, you're not gonna die unless it's too heinous. Like you really have to be actively encouraging your own death to die on Mage. Like you have to see it and be, of course, Frost Mage, but you have to see it and you have to be like, okay, I'm willing to die on this. Let's see how it pans out. Like realistically, that's the only way you're going to die on Mage in a way that's not like either, obviously in later dungeons, you could die in like strat feasibly without meaning to, right? You get locked in the room with Baron Riveter and something goes wrong. Obviously you could just die, but most shit, you just can't. You're really not gonna get killed. Yeah, well, there's a lot of people that point out mages are a lot easier. So like some people will go fire just to make it a hard challenge, or they'll do only AoE farming, stuff like that, or only caves, or they'll like increase it on their own. It's not like fire. Realistically speaking, you go fire now. You can't AoE farm if you want to AoE farm as fire. Oh, okay, no. They definitely do. Go. Yeah, they definitely AoE farm as Frost, but fire would be interesting. But that's the thing. You can AoE farm as fire. It's AIDS as hell, and you can do like only really small pulls, and every single time it's super dangerous. But single targeting as fire is easier than any like leveling as Frost, unless you're going to single target as Frost. If you're going to single target as Frost, if you're not even going to AoE farm at all, you're just phoning it in. You're just taking the easy route, right? You gotta risk it a little bit. My first mage in vanilla in 2004, the first character I got to level 60, never rated on, but first character I got to level 60 was a fire mage. I worked up in fire the entire time. Fire's actually really good. Fire's actually really it's better in like a speed leveling scenario. Obviously it's less safe, but in a like trying to go fast scenario on like launches. Up until level like I think it's when you can AoE farm. Realistically, it's better to go fire. I just remember you still go the hit talent, but you go improve fireball because it's just better early on. Well, most likely I was using extremely wrong like spec, most likely. Like I was probably taking PvP talents like as much as I could. Like I was for a long time, for like 10 levels, I was using a sword with Agi on it because I was going to be a battle mage. Like, I mean, I just had no clue about how the game worked. So I'm sure, I just remember I'd stayed as far away from a mob as possible, just start casting and hope.
It's literally the correct way to play it. So you're literally correct. You want to literally be 41 yards and just slam pyros in between mobs just because you get more regen from it. It costs less mana and it does more damage.
Zatar, what do you think of the no Hearthstone in hardcore?
I'm not sure what it is attempting to accomplish. If it's just the paladin thing, I guess while leveling in the 40s, I guess that's kind of strong. You can bubble Hearth, but to be honest, I think paladin is probably the hardest class to level in hardcore.
Even harder than
the most boring
warrior. Oh, it is boring.
I think so. It's so boring. I don't know how you make it to 60. Honestly,
that's a good take. I like this.
I think that's part of the balance.
Maybe it is so boring in vanilla. Like, oh man,
that's actually fair. Mage is very interesting. So like as I think it might end up being the easiest because of how interesting it is. Rogue, same thing. Rogues are
pretty fun.
I had a good time with Rogue.
It's fun to press your buttons, Whereas Paladin, you're just phoning it in the whole fucking time.
Yeah, so I don't think the Hearthstone thing is necessary. If anything, if you're worried about people like escaping too easily, I think you want to remove Petri. I think that would make things a little more exciting.
Petri and leaving the group warps you out of the dungeon.
Yeah, I'm not sure. What do they do if someone is like, you need to kick someone from the group?
I've wondered that too.
I think you just increase the timer. Like you just make it so it's like a 2-minute timer. Like I think the vast majority of things can't be escaped. Like if you remove Petri.
Yeah, if you remove Petri.
Yeah, that's true.
If you remove Petri and you make it a 2-minute timer, right? Like yes, they can still escape by like dropping group and just fleeing, but it's going to be a lot harder.
That just makes Rogue the best dungeon class then, because they're the ones that actually get out of combat.
Yeah, I mean hunters, right?
Hunters, yeah, too.
Hunters can still feign, and rogues, their vanish will break to a lot of raid bosses. A lot of times, it is not very easy to vanish from a raid boss. They still keep you in combat. Yeah,
dots and bleeds screw you big time. We don't have any cloak. I don't know. I think there's a lot of questions like that, but yeah, the Petri thing is the thing I worry about. I think it would be pretty annoying to get it to the end of a dungeon, then have to walk all the way back out, and I don't know, respawns and everything else.
Yeah, I just think Petri is like really bad for the excitement of the game. I mean, I guess it keeps your characters alive, but like for a viewer point of view, Petri is like the last thing you want to see. And then from a point of view of someone who wants to raid, like I have a 60 rogue. I have not raided in hardcore. And the reason is because from my point of view, it's going to be the exact same thing as raiding was in vanilla, except we're going to go slower and we're going to rebuff world buffs more. Like leave the raid, rebuff more often. And the danger is not even really there if you have Petri. Most of the deaths to Petri come from people who don't know how to click it. I'm not joking when I say that. Like they don't know how to cancel it and click it again, which should just be a macro. It should just be cancel aura, Petri, re-Petri. So when most of the hardcore raid deaths are people not clicking a Petri correctly, that doesn't seem very fun to me or exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Same.
I mean the whole gimmick of hardcore, right, is the relationship between the character and death, and it fundamentally throws a wedge between that relationship. So it's gonna be fucking fried. Right, there's no two ways around it. It's just it subverts the natural relationship.
Yeah, that's why I was glad they didn't use it in Road to Rag, and I don't know when they started using it. I don't know if it was during BWL or what, because I
think for AQ on, it poses some serious questions because the risk is extremely high in those dungeons, but like. Yeah, it's difficult because you don't want to kill your character, right? You don't want to kill your character, and a lot of mechanics in like AQ on, you're just straight like you go to Huhuran, you're just risking death every time you step in,
dude.
which
not even the not even really the bosses, but the freaking trash. Like I just remember getting shot to the roof on some of the trash, and you didn't stand exactly in the corner, so your head had hit the thing. Oh my God.
A lot of the trash packs, if you pull an extra pack, the trash packs between Emps and Cthulhu, but like a lot of the later bosses, obviously Cthulhu, Twin Emps, who are on like Oro. If you're even gonna do Oro, I wouldn't even do Oro. That seems terrible.
Oh man.
Yeah, imagine dying to the popcorn after the boss, because you can, like, the popcorn on the ground still stays there. You just kind of stop paying attention, but you can't. That's the nice bit. But yeah, in those raids, I kind of get why people started leaning towards it, because you've got all these hours and hours and hours into your character. Obviously, you're going to spend the time to farm a couple flasks to prevent your own death. It's and if it's there, people are going to use it, right? People will. And it was Sid Meier's who said this, I believe. He said that you should always be careful, because players will min-max the fun out of the games that they're playing.
Yep.
Right? With every intention of having fun, they will min-max the fun out of their own game.
And for me, honestly, like really, what makes hardcore fun for me is leveling. Like I don't know, like the raiding part, I don't know that that's something I'm super interested in. I do kind of want to get in on maybe a first kill or something when the servers come out, but like doing it regularly, like it's not something that appeals to me. I'd rather just go again and start a new character and see what it's like to work up a different class, stuff like that. But people are going to try to do it. I just don't know how that's going to be one of the biggest problems with hardcore servers, is like the gatekeeping of being able to raid, because there's only going to be a handful of guilds that are even capable of it. And then you're going to have a whole bunch of people on the bench. I guess you'll be wanting to work up extra characters while like in between raids, but it seems like it could be something where people don't realize that it's just probably not going to happen for them.
I think the ultimate like expression of goodwill, though, and like a raid wipe, is imagine if you don't have Petri. Like, you have to start doing the calculus, especially if you're on Alliance, if you're willing to DI on your paladin to save another person. Right? So people probably do that. People will probably, like, having extra paladins, huge thing. You probably don't want to give the paladins a lot of gear, because the paladins can choose to sacrifice themselves to save like your main tank. Mm-hmm. And they pretty much always would want to, but most wipes come after the death of the main tank anyway. So it's a tricky thing. It's a very interesting dynamic. It makes for very cool and interesting and dynamic content, especially if you remove the Petri stuff, because then it just becomes, if Petri's in, obviously it's just, okay, are we farming our prerequisite, however many hundreds of Black Lotus that we need for this raid, right? Prior to the raid. It's just always a barrier, which is cool, because then you have people out in the world doing stuff in the world. But if there's no PvP, because there's not going to be, it's just running around looking for Lotus, right? It's not right. In the end, it's not all that dynamic. So
yeah, it was actually pretty exciting on the road to Rag in one of the dungeons. I forget which one. Calamity DI'd Grace for Days, who was one of the tanks that they were using for the road to Rag. So
yeah,
I think that was on an island. I think.
They were doing the
Is it Alcaz Island or something? It's the one by Dustwallow Marsh, I think, with all the elites.
Yeah. I barely remember, but it was epic.
Why were they at Alcaz Island?
I'm guessing maybe like the 0.5 quest chain.
I think it was the 0.5 quest chain.
That's where I went for Dark Mantle. So
yep, true.
I think warriors like the 0.5 gear there too. I don't know what classes in hardcore rating are using it, but I know rogue and warrior would both want it.
Rogue definitely.
Mage wants it ideally. A lot of people want it. It's pretty strong gear.
But I mean, yeah, that's I guess we talked more than just about Hearth, but I don't know that I want Hearth out. But I thought it was an interesting thing. But
I definitely do not want Hearth out.
You could also just make it so that you, right, like rather than, you could not throw out the baby with the bathwater by making it so that you can't cast Hearth with bubble up. Like that, I imagine that's
what I first said.
That would take probably like 10 seconds to code, realistically. Like if Aura, like, this, then cannot cast this, right? Like can't take that long. I hate being
Yeah.
a backseat dev, but it seems like that would be pretty fucking easy.
Yeah, but whatever. I don't know. I feel like we'll just get the servers and just see what happens. Like, I'm kind of at that point, but Petri I would like reboot for sure. But it's not a whole ton else that I'm really caring about. Oh, all right. Well, what have you guys been doing lately? Who wants to go?
I assume you mean in general and not just WoW, because you mentioned it earlier.
Yeah, I've been raid logging WoW. I've still been raiding, 3 10-mans or 2 10-mans and 3 25-mans a week, but I haven't really been doing anything else. I've been playing Diablo. So
Yeah, I
there,
do.
I went.
Yeah, I do 1 25-man a week in Wrath now. And sometimes that still feels like one too many. I'm not going to lie. But besides that, I've been playing hardcore. I did try Diablo 4, but I haven't been playing that much. And then, honestly, I've been playing more retail than any other version of WoW, to be honest.
Interesting.
And in this patch, you've been playing retail?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
What class you been playing?
I play a Holy Paladin.
Okay.
I
played this patch as well. The raid is really lame, I think. And usually I play for rating. So I imagine if you're like an M+ or you're like an arena player, it's probably fairly interesting. But yeah, I don't know. The raids just seems kind of meh.
Yeah, I play for M+, and I like that the raid is short because I don't play for retail raid.
Fair enough. There you go. That makes sense. I like, my friends are not like good enough to. The friends that I play M+ with are like, they're not. They don't really want to like push keys. That's not their meme. So
that's definitely a big problem with retail. It's like a lot harder to play with your friends than like Classic or any version up to Wrath. It's like, oh, this guy is not able to do the content I want to do, so I either don't play with him or I can't get the upgrades I'm looking for. Yeah. So I think that's one of the bigger problems in retail still.
Yeah, I don't think there's any real remedy to it though, because the content is sort of like designed to be harder, and like obviously they're the earlier versions. Like you can go do normals with your friends, you can go do heroics with your friends, right? Like you don't have to do mythic and M+ with your friends, and the other versions of the game are not that difficult. So I think they realized that when they made the heroic versions like they've done that before, like in the not this tier but the 2 tiers before it, they've made like heroic substantially harder, and I think everyone was like kind of maybe don't do that because I want to eat peanuts and drink my beer and do my heroic mode.
Yeah, true.
Yeah,
I don't know anything about retail.
I also think, I don't know, retail's weird. Like it's complicated and then also not complicated in a lot of ways. Like it feels like every single fight, like I was doing Avarice, it feels like every single fight is on God the same. Like it's like, ooh, here's the frontal, ooh, here's the spread mechanic, ooh, here's the stack mechanic, oh, Swirly's on the ground. And I'm like, this is every fight. This is literally every single fight. Every single fight's this, and then there's like one unique mechanic. It's like, oh, you got to run in that part of the room. Oh, this time you got to run in that other part of the room. Oh, this time you spawn the stack point. It's like, okay, like I don't know. It seems very M+ isn't this way though. M+ is nice because M+ has just so many different fucking dungeons that it does feel actually very different. But the raid mechanics feel very, very samey to me. But I didn't play Mythic. I imagine Mythic is where the real differentiating mechanics come into place. But that, to me, that feels shitty. Like the boss doesn't have its fundamental identity. But it's also true in Old War, right? Like every heroic every hard mode boss doesn't feel like a boss unless it's on hard mode. So
yeah, it doesn't.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe I should just get good. Maybe the answer to that is to get good. Maybe my complaint is just because I'm not hardcore enough on retail, but I don't want to be. Like I don't like it's too, I don't know, it's too sweat. It's too sweat and simultaneously not sweat enough. I don't know.
When our casual raid was progressing on XT, like, and we'd have to end up calling it or something, like we progressed for like 40 minutes or so, and then we're like, okay, we'll just move on. Doing it easy mode just felt so horrible. Like he's literally just the heart the entire time.
Yeah, it's not a boss.
It's horrible.
Literally, he's hard, and then he's like, he spawns back up. He's ready to play, and you're like, oh, so tired, and he's just spamming the whole fucking fight because he's just not real. Also, feel me on this. I feel like he is a vague, like Midwestern, like sort of Minnesotan thing. He's like, oh, I'm so tired. Like, but my friends be like, I don't
So
hear
tired.
that. Yeah, no, it sounds vaguely Minnesotan. Am I completely off the money there? Like, what do we feel? What do we feel?
Oh, what does it sound like? It sounds like.
So listen, he's like, oh, so tired. I'll rest for just a moment. Like, there's like, it's the moment that really like. That's where I'm like, oh, like you wanna, you wanna. You want to get a fucking butter burger, bro? And like I don't, because I'm feeling one. Like I just, it sounds very, very suspicious to me. That's all.
Fair.
Fair. Well, what have you been doing?
I run 4 Old Wars a week, and I run the only 10-mans in my guild. So the 2 10-mans that run in my guild, usually it's only one 10-man that runs, but I run those. We're prepping for TOGC, so we've been speed killing the last 2 weeks of the tier. So our main raid is now 2 nights a week, and it's 5 hours each night, because you just have to. Old War is really, really bad with this. I've never seen a tier this bad for what we're doing. You just have to spam wipe. Like if XT can just go through, and he can just never tantrum. If you kill him in 3 minutes, he could just never tantrum. It's possible that he never presses that button. It's basically impossible that he never presses the button, but he could just not. But that's where the real RNG comes into play. If you get 1 tantrum on that fight and you're only running 2 paladins, you can desack both. You can have your priest, if you're 2 healing it, pop divine him, and then you're fine. But if a second tantrum comes, everyone's dead. Like you realistically cannot survive in a very aggressive 2 heal scenario with every single person alive. With 2 tantrums on the boss, and you can get 2 or you can get 1, so you just have to spam wipe until you get good ones. If the wrong DPS gets chain gravity bomb, it's fucked. Same thing on Iron Council. If you get bad rune timings, you just have to wipe. If you get bad rune of death timings, you just have to wipe.
There is a lot of like chance mechanics, I feel like, in Old War.
Yeah, and because of how short some of the fights end up being as well, like Razor Scale, for instance, because of how Razor Scale works. If you get a bad demonic pact on Razor Scale, you just wipe. Same thing with Kolagarn. Kolagarn, you get a bad demonic pact at the start, you wipe. If you get a bad grip on Kolagarn at the start, someone gets gripped in the first 10 seconds of a 38-second fight. In the first 10 seconds, you just fuck off because you can just never grip anyone, right? And then so you have to make that calculus like, oh, okay, well, he gripped 25 seconds in. Is that acceptable? We're now missing 3 DPS and execute. Is that okay with us? Generally speaking, it is.
So you're trying to parse? Is that why you're trying to do it?
No,
I think speed run. Right?
We're trying to speed kill. So we're going for all-star points, but guild all-star points. Not a lot of people know.
Got you.
But it's like if you kill the boss, the faster you kill the boss, like the boss, so you can wipe over and over and over again. The faster you kill the boss, you get more all-star points for your guild. It's not like a solo thing, because like we could do the parsing thing, and like Bipolar does that, and people do that. We think that's kind of cringe, where it's like, okay, we funnel one person pretty much every resource, and then they get a shiny little 100 next to their name. We think that that's selfish and dumb. And then how do you decide who gets it anyway? It's dumb. Whereas if we're all working towards the same goal of killing the boss as fast as possible, we'll do what's optimal in every scenario. And so it's easier to do. And we like it. We think it's fun because then you have to execute on it. And the fights that aren't cringe are really cool, right? So like doing Algalon in a speed kill scenario is really, really dope because you one tank it and you use target dummies to absorb the phase punches. And you have to, you doom all the stars at the start, about 30 seconds into the stars spawning, you doom all the stars, or it's like 15 seconds in, you doom all the stars, and then it's 22 seconds in. Anyway, you doom all the stars, and then you walk in at the very last moment, and they all explode in the 1 second that you're underneath, and it's like less than a quarter of a second, sort of like lead time. So we had to make all these weak auras, and we had to get everyone all used to, doing it properly and getting the target dummies, and it ends up being really, really fun because, like you actually have to execute. Everyone has to be playing optimally, and everyone has to just be pumping their fucking hearts out to try and beat the, Taiwanese raid that has 17 Death Knights in it, right? So it ends up being
That's kind of cool.
Ends up being really, really fun and really challenging. Old War has a lot of bad fights for it, though. I'll be honest. Like Mimron, for instance, you can have all your warlocks stand outside at the start and then teleport in, and if they get the fires on them, it makes the fight infinitely easier because the Frostbomb can't go there. He can't cast the Frostbomb outside. Or he can cast the Frostbomb outside, but it doesn't travel. So it doesn't bleed inside. So if the fires are out there, they're stuck out there. And then if the frost bomb hits them, he hits no other fires, which makes it very weird and fucky. And so you can do that on Mimron. Where you get the frost bombs on Mimron really matters. Freya, you just have to spam reset her until you get Conservator first. And it's literally less than a 30-second. It's like a less than a 40-second fight. Yeah. So but it's not even wait to the Conservator. You're burning her, and then the Conservator pops up and it's good, or Conservator doesn't pop up and you're wiped. So it ends up being really, really shitty. There are some bosses that are actually fine. Thorum, very little RNG. So it actually ends up being fine. Yogg, very little RNG. Vezax, Vezax actually has a lot of RNG, which is really shitty because it's like who gets the mark. If the wrong person gets the mark, because you push Vezax to like 20,000 health, and then you have everyone stop, and you try not to heal it. You have everyone spread, then you come together right before the animus spawns, and then you try and kill. And if a mage doesn't get the mark, you basically just lose, and you can't get. But we got really lucky. A druid got our mark, but he got hit by a shadow crash, and so he was in Narnia. And so that was the only mark that we got, and we just got lucky that guy was an idiot, and we got a perfect pull, and we got the world's fastest kill on it. Because also we stacked literally every single DPS was a caster except for like 2 people, right? And so it's like some of the stuff that you have to do is a little cringe, but executing on it's really fun. Like Yogg is such a fun fight for that, because in Yogg you're just spawning like 4 or 5 guardians at the start, and you're just AoEing them down, and you're just doing your very best not to fucking die with 2 healers, and you're burning Yogg in the brain phase with 1 phase. You have to move all the casters away from where the Death Knights are underground. You have to literally position them in a different position so that the lust downstairs doesn't lust them upstairs, so you can still kill them in the last phase.
Dude, your healers have got to be like,
They love it though, because they can parse. Like it's the best. Like our guild, like we joke, our guild is like it's a healer parse guild, right? Because we run the fewest number of healers possible. We 1 heal Ignis, we 0 heal Razor Scale, we 1 heal pretty much everything. We 1 heal Iron Council, we 1 heal. Like Iron Council, trying to do an Iron
What's
Council.
What's your 1 healer?
It's an HPAL, obviously.
Yeah.
Because it's the only thing that can. You have to do 18,000 HPS. That's the only, because the raid is taking 18,000 damage per second. If you don't heal that, they're just gonna die. They take a little bit more. They take around, it's like 21,000 DPS on average is what they're taking in the fight. But they can heal from like Judgment of Light and their own self heals. So running Death Knights on there obviously is very, very, very powerful. But I'm looking forward to TOGC. We're doing VOD reviews, some PTR stuff for TOGC, so we're prepping for that. I'm really looking forward to it. I really hope we don't fucking wipe. It's a terrible mechanic, but yeah. I've been playing a lot of WoW lately. I played a little Diablo. It's good. I like it. It's just you get past the 50s, and like I'm hardcore on that, so it's like I don't want to die. I've already died a couple times, and I died to like really shitty weird stuff, like died to like a DC, and then I died to a 1-shot because I was playing World Tier 2 and I probably shouldn't have been, and it was like a badly upscaled boss in one of the strongholds starting off. So Diablo's been fun, but I
haven't played hardcore on Diablo, but like I would have been like the first time I died, no, the second time I died. First time I died real early. It's just I didn't understand what was going on. But the first time I died, knowing what I was doing was I was in a dungeon going for a certain aspect that I need for my bar build. And I got done with the dungeon. I was just like, well, I'm going to look and see just what's in the rest of it, see if there's any chests or anything. And the freaking butcher comes out and just beats the crap out of me. I could barely do any damage to him. And I was just like, man, if that was hardcore, that would have sucked.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, it's I mean, you just teleport out if you see the butcher and you feel that your build's not good enough. And I haven't really hit the hyperscaling yet. So it's like after you get, like, if I go do all the Lilith statues and I start like getting a really like all of the renown and all the paragon points, like I'm assuming it would be really cool, because then you're just one-shotting shit. But the thing that I run into, and the reason why I'm not grinding it all that much, is because and a lot of people voice this as a complaint, the nightmare dungeons don't feel good to do. They don't have enough reward, and everyone says this.
They're buffing that. They just talked about it like 2 days ago.
They did talk about it. Okay.
Yeah, the dev.
I'll probably
update.
play it again then. Yeah, because like that, I don't want to play if I'm literally just I'm getting all this stuff. I'm going to optimize the hell out of my character. Dope. I'm going to be super sick. I'm going to be just litty. Liddy Rogue, I'm just gonna fuck everything up, and then I'm just doing normal dungeons, right? Like that feels kind of ass.
Yep. Yep.
So if they fix that, I would actually consider.
Yeah, that was one of the things they were talking about in that. Forget what it was, developer Q&A or something like that, or statement or something. I know. I watched some guy with red hair tells me all about these things on YouTube.
Nice.
Yeah. He's just the first guy I found, and he just tells me all of the news. So I'm like, oh, perfect. Found my guy. All right, yeah, Mel, what have you been up to? Mel?
Sorry, I'm back. Yeah, I do one raid a week in Old War, but I'm trying to get my Valenier, so that's okay. I haven't gotten very many. Bob's cursed me, I think. So, I've got like 8 right now to do.
Looking forward to the changes in the next patch then, right?
Yes, very much so. That'll be nice. But other than that, I've been playing some Diablo 4. Not like a ton. I think we've played a couple nights, but it's pretty fun. It's weird to get used to. I've never played Diablo before, so it's just weird to get used to how to move. And I keep trying to press W, and then it brings up some really weird thing on my screen, and then I'm like trying to figure out. Like I keep trying to press my WoW buttons, and
I keep trying to tab, and it keeps opening up the map when I'm in a fight.
Yeah, that too. So yeah, but
we'll be right back for 1 minute. I have to use the restroom.
Cool.
You're good.
Good luck.
But yeah, overall, it's pretty fun. It's not too bad.
I got on today and tried to move my character, and I was like, "Why am I not moving?" I was on WoW, getting ready for my GDKP. I'm like, "Oh, wow, this is WoW. Oh yeah, okay, I have to turn. Okay."
Well, I was playing a sorcerer, and I was doing my own thing, and I don't remember which one I was doing, but then Bob sent me this thing, and he was like, "Hey, here's a good leveling spec. Switch to this." And it was this like firewall spec, and I was like, "God damn it, this is so not as fun as the one I was using with the little shock blasts that went around to everybody." It was a lot of fun. Bob made me do this fire one. I'm getting used to it.
I just pointed it out. I was like, "This guy made a bard build I really liked, and this is one of his builds. If you want to try it," and you're like, "Okay, I'll try it." And you're like, "It sucks." I was like, "Well, then go back." You're like, "Eh."
Well, yeah, that's a lot of work. I don't remember. I like created it on my own as I was doing it, so I remember exactly what I had.
That's what I like about it. Like once you actually get to know the game, like there's a really cool ways to build out things where everything just compounds on top of everything else, which I think is neat. But I don't know. It's probably not something I'm going to play. Like I'm going to play a ton of it now, but I don't know how long it'll have legs. But there's not a whole. I might have a lot of extra time compared to the time I had at the start of Old War to the time I'm going to have at the start of TOC. It's going to be a very different situation for me. Well, Zatar, so you've been playing hardcore, you said.
Indeed.
Okay, so you have 160. How many times have you died?
Well, with my rogue, I'd never died, so I went 1 to 60 without any deaths. I did some pretty crazy stuff too. Like my last 59 to 60, I think I soloed like 6 or 7 elite quests, like the final couple hours. I was trying to just do cool stuff. Like, the bat. I don't know if you saw the bat that killed Summit, Duskwing or something.
Duskwing, yep.
Killed that guy. Killed.
Did you have to
in Winter Spring
do gouge kite and stuff like that? Is that how you did it?
Yeah, and specifically that bat has like a screech, so you can't just gouge kite. You have to line of sight gouge kite, which means you can't let the mob look at you until you're gouging it, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So there's like these little towers in Eastern Plaguelands that I was looping around the tower. They're the PvP towers. So yeah, I had to do that. There's a lot of stuff. Did some things that weren't very smart. I soloed Plugger on a hardcore. That was pretty fun because I had done that on a normal character, and then I was doing it again on a hardcore and trying not to die.
Hold on. Which one's? Wait, Hogger?
Plugger. Plugger is. No one knows who these bosses are.
I don't know who Plugger is.
Everyone knows. Okay, Plugger is the Guzzler boss in BRD. He is the kind of gnome guy that's leper gnome or whatever with the hat.
Oh,
and
the
he's
Grim
guy who sells the
Guzzler.
alcohol. Yep, he's the guzzler guy. He casts Shadow Bolt, Immolate, Banish are his abilities. So it's pretty interesting. And you have to stealth to him. It's a little bit dangerous. I think I did it at 53, so I wasn't even that high. So it was pretty exciting.
Wow.
Nice.
Yeah. Yeah, I did I remember back in the day, back in Vanilla, we did stealth runs to get our pre-bis, all through BRD and lower Blackrock Spire. Mel was a druid healer. I was a rogue, and we had a friend who was a druid feral, and we would just stealth to everything, kill it, the three of us. That's how we got our pre-bis.
Yeah, that's really cool. I only really did something like that for Hodge when it dropped from Angerforge. I did a couple stealth runs where I'd 2-man it with another rogue, but then eventually I figured out how to solo it. So I stopped doing those. I just soloed Hodge, but I didn't really need anything else from BRD. But yeah, that's definitely pretty cool.
So what are you working up now?
Well, now I'm trying trios or duos. I've never really done any sort of group hardcore before. But I was playing with some people that were newer to the game, or one player who's brand new to WoW. So that's always an experience. Yeah. And I keep I got us killed because I made them solo Ragefire at 14. And they're this is their first dungeon experience is a 3-man solo Ragefire. And we don't even have that many strong classes. We have Warrior, which is pretty weak early. I was playing Shaman, which is weak early, which was not a very good idea. So it kind of doomed us to death, and then we did die. But we got halfway in, but yeah.
Sorry, I thought you were supposed to help us here.
Yeah, and then at the end, I'm like, yeah, I kind of knew we were going to die. And they're like, what? And I was like, yeah, sorry about that.
Oh, God.
Oh, man. Well, I mean, it's good to die early, I guess. I mean, that's pretty early.
Yeah. I was sad at first when we died, and then I was like, thank God I don't have to play Shaman anymore. So I kind of learned, based on how bad I didn't feel about dying, that I should not have picked Shaman. So that's at least good.
It's almost like an opportunity.
Yeah. Oh, I should have played something really strong, like a warlock or a mage or a hunter, the classes that can almost solo dungeons by themselves.
Right.
Because if we're going to do hard stuff, right, I should probably play something really strong.
Yep.
That's awesome.
Do we have North back yet?
Yeah, I'm here.
All right, I'm going to move us on to time for the news. All right. I mean, it's not really great news, but I figured I would throw it in there just because it is news. But you can now disable the last played bar in battle.net client. So
why is that? I mean, cool.
I don't know.
I don't know.
A few years back, they made it so you could appear offline in Battle.net too. And then years later, they do this now.
You're just trying to hide what you're doing, what you were playing last night, and nobody was watching or something?
Well, I don't know. When I first saw it, I thought it was addressing the issues that a lot of the PvP crowd has, both in retail and in Classic, because basically the highest end PvPers are watching the best PvPers. They just do add friend in the WoW client, and they can see when they come online and they stop queuing, and when they go offline, they start queuing once again, right? And so,
did you have to accept a friend? You can't just add.
Not like a Battle.net friend. These are WoW friend.
Yep.
So you just hit add and it remembers them. And they do it for counter matchups, right? We really can't beat, Warrior, HPAL, X, whatever, if it's 3s. So they see them online, they just don't queue.
Got it.
Counters are a big part of Arena. So it's actually
huge.
If you just never queue against your worst matchup, and you can do the opposite too, and see that good matchups for you are online. If you're queuing and 80% of your games are against good matchups, I mean, it's a completely different landscape for your win-loss ratio. And when everyone else is doing that, you kind of have to do it yourself because it's an MMR system. Everyone else above you is doing it. You can't catch up. So it's actually a big issue.
So yeah, so people have been calling for dude, we have it in BNet. Just make it so we can appear offline line to anybody that has us friended. Like, and that's what I thought this was when I first read the headline. But then I was like, wait a second, doesn't do anything, does it? I don't know. Like, because
the bar, I don't even think it works for classic era as showing your like recent games to launch based on. I'm pretty sure it doesn't, because when I've never seen it in the bar. So, well, fun fact, they're discriminating against the classic era players as well.
Well, dude, I've seen where like if someone's playing retail, I can see like the name of their character, where they're at in retail on BNet, but then if it's WoW Classic, I just see WoW Classic, right?
Well, this is a little different. This is actually, I think it's a new bar at the top of their new launcher that lets you, with one click, launch a recent game, so that you don't have to go like game.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about now.
You know, that whole deal. The only thing is, like I said, it doesn't work for classic era for whatever reason, from what I haven't gotten it to work.
So, okay, so it did work for me. I thought it was the weirdest thing because I clicked it and the last thing I had done was classic era, and it took me into classic era, and I was like, oh shoot, no, I need to actually go back to the game and switch the drop down menu. I think it just took me to whichever one I was in the drop down, but I could be wrong. Maybe it didn't happen.
No,
like
I mean,
that.
if I look at mine right now, I have the Wrath, and then I have World of Warcraft.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
when I click classic era.
Yeah, classic, you have to, it's got the 2 drop downs for classic.
Like I just tested it. It seems like it shares a slot with like Wrath, because when I clicked it, it like grayed out Wrath. Like I had just launched Wrath, but I launched classic era. And then I look at my bar, I don't see classic era as one of the 3 options. Maybe if I click the Wrath button.
I think it only, go ahead.
I guess that is how it works. Wrath and classic era are like shared on the button.
Yeah, I think so.
Which is interesting.
So it'll just do whichever one was actually last. Interesting.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Do you know something that is completely unrelated, but I find very funny and very interesting?
No telling.
Human beings do not have receptors for wetness or dryness, right? So we determine it based on temperature, right? So if you touch something that is wet, it's almost always going to be a different temperature. And so that's how we determine that. Literally, and some animals do have, they can determine if things are wet or not. We can't, which is why if you touch something that's cold late at night and you can't see it, it feels like it's wet.
Is that true?
And I'm encountering this a lot lately because I sliced the bottom of my big toe off and it's healed since. And so usually it would be extremely, like relatively speaking, it used to be very callous because I walk around barefoot a lot and I walk around in sandals a lot. So like my feet are fairly, rough. And so for the first time in years, I can feel like sensations on the bottom of my foot, like on the bottom of my big toe. And it's obviously some of the areas on the ground are going to be cooler than others. And I constantly think that my foot, like my toe is wet. Even though it's not, it's never wet. There's not like random liquids on the ground in my house. It's just colder than everything else, and I can feel the coldness, and I think that it's wet. It's crazy.
That is weird. I've never heard that before.
Yeah, that's why like if late at night, if you go and it's like really really dark out, and you touch like if you touch something, and your brain obviously with contextual information, it'll look at it, it'll see it, and so you can determine something's cold or not if you touch it. But if you touch it, and the only thing that you get is cold, it will also feel wet if you have no other senses informing whether or not that thing is actually wet. Because if your eyes can see and they're like, okay, well, this obviously isn't wet, it's just going to feel cold. But if you can't see and you just have the sensation of touch, it can only detect the change in temperature and pressure.
Interesting.
I was really waiting for this to tie back to the WoW launcher for a second, and then I realized it wasn't.
Completely unrelated.
He's just sitting there thinking about his toe.
I did my due diligence. I said this has nothing to do with anything.
I missed that. I was like, wait a minute, where are we going here? What's this coming to? That's awesome.
Oh, yep, that's all the news we got. So, yeah. I guess we'll move on to...
Bobby, we need to have a talk about this World of Warcraft Classic. Do I look like I know what a WoW token is?
All right, so this week's discussion, I thought it'd just be kind of cool right before TOC comes out, not a lot of news, just to kind of talk about the current state of Wrath of the Lich King Classic. I know Zatar has a lot of grievances to air that we're going to let him get to, and I'm sure North has a ton of thoughts, and Mel is probably like, meh. And yeah, we're going to do it, but I think we should do this voicemail first. Just kind of set the stage, because it does have a question about difficulty.
Hello, Bob, Mel, and guests. So I've got kind of two questions, and, well, technically one question and a statement, I guess, depending on how you view it. So my question isn't necessarily about raid difficulty, but it's a more player, I guess, personal question on the player base. Does the classic player base like hard difficulty, or do they enjoy difficulty in raiding overall? Because it's an interesting contrast I've seen, because I know people I've talked to that say, well, you know, my guild's just kind of pounding their head and I burnt out and quit. But then I see, you know, what I saw other people say, well, no, I love that progression. I just want to keep at it. And it's an interesting thing when I hear, well, 50% of guilds haven't cleared it, but then again, if logs aren't giving correct information because of, well, is it the same character on different people or vice versa? Do we really have an accurate way to say that? And we've seen the resurgence of error, and, well, no secret, the raids aren't difficult in class. They're not, right? We all know this isn't something that's unknown. So I guess the question I have, do you think that the classic player base does like hard raiding content? And if they do, why are people burning out? Is it, you think, just guilds or guild drama, not be able to find people to do it? Like, what's the reason you think people are burning out on Uldar? Is it just because it's old? Like, what do you think the reason is? And I will take jail for what I said last week. Yes, you're right. You cannot buy 6K gold for $2 or whatever I said. I did look. It's a little bit more than that. But my point does stand. Paying 5K gold for $20 is still really low. It's actually lower now last I looked. Anyway, that's pretty much what I had to ask. If I were to add one more thing, do you think that Cataclysm is just going to be the end of it? Because the raids don't get easier. I mean, does that make Cata bad? Not necessarily. But I don't know. It's an interesting thing. I've been thinking a lot. And even if we do get to MOP, the raids are very good, you know? Anyway, that's pretty much all I had to say. This is Mega Casual, signing out.
I think that's a very good question. I think it's a very interesting question, actually. I've thought about a lot about that.
Yeah, I think, honestly, the reality of it is everybody wants hard raids, but everybody wants to be good enough to clear hard raids. And the reality is that there's some people that just aren't, and they don't want to accept that, and so they get frustrated, and or they don't surround themselves by the right people, right? And I think everybody wants it, but when they can't do it, that's what makes them very frustrated. There's also the progression angle of progressing. If you're making progress every attempt is one thing and can be very motivating. Progressing if you're doing the same thing over and over again and not getting anywhere is absolutely the most frustrating thing in the world, and nobody will continue to do that.
It reminds me of that gif of the lady going, and like you say, like the WoW Classic players have the patience to wipe over and over again. And I just think of the gif of the girl going, we ain't got time for that shit. Like, oh my God. Like, it's just, yeah, I feel like the classic player base, like on the majority, does not want super hard raids. Like, they just want to have some beers, get some gears. And I think it's the like really good players and everybody that wants the stuff to be harder. And, you know, but that's just what I think. I don't know.
I think ultimately that's where you see the failures of Ulduar really come into focus. I think is that the fights aren't real fights unless they're hard modes, and so you don't get this dichotomy that you get later on. I think one difficulty is the best way to go in general, but that's like a weird philosophical take. Like, I don't like the truncation of different difficulties. I think it ends up with really weird incentives, and I think that it ends up spoiling some of the content itself. But
I've hated it forever.
Speaking, it can't, like, if you're gonna introduce really hard content and then there's no alternative that is easier. I think vanilla does a really good job of this because there's 20-man raids and there's you can stick to. There's a lot of dungeon content that's extremely compelling. So it's not that okay, it's not just that the other content's easier. It's that there's other content that is less important, that is accessible in other ways. You can just spam ZGs and do the early raids in vanilla, even in the later tiers, and you could still play and enjoy the game functionally. But when Wrath becomes essentially just a raid log simulator, if you're not doing all of the content in Wrath, people start asking the question, well, I can't do everything. Why am I doing it? And so it's that I think that ends up being the difficulty, alongside that there are bosses you can only do when you're in a more hardcore environment, or at least when your leadership has done enough work to really prepare people for these fights. Because even the top end guilds weren't sure exactly how Algalon worked on launch. Like a lot of people, like I was having things explained to me on Algalon, like on our first attempts on Algalon, because we didn't see a lot of the PTR time. Because even though we were a hardcore guild, we couldn't see enough PTR time because the fights were relatively difficult, and we just didn't have enough time to put that many hours in on Algalon. So we didn't know that, and I'm sure a lot of guilds still don't know, that the ways that the stars spawn on a certain timer and they can only ever spawn up to 4. I think that the vast majority of people probably know this, but in our first clear, we didn't know that. And had someone not explained it to me in chat, we probably wouldn't have killed it. So, right, like
chat helps a lot.
It was too much damage going out, and it was like we didn't have enough paladins to realistically keep with 4 stars every 90 seconds. Was too much. We had 6 paladins going, and even that was not enough because we were just taking too much fucking damage. It wasn't even the question of that cool. We had a cooldown for every single one, and obviously that was its own nightmare. And it felt like I was playing the piano, hitting these macros that would, populate people's screens with a weak aura, screaming at them which cooldown, because we double cooldowned every single star. And that's the only way that we were able to accomplish it early on, especially with the volume of stars that we were killing. So I think that Mel's right. I think that people want to be challenged, but not so challenged that they can't kill the fucking thing, right? People want to clear it easily enough, and I think that if push comes to shove, that they would prefer the easier content versus the real grueling progression, because most people aren't down for that, right? The lion's share of people are not really going to take a hard look and dive into the logs and really go over strats and really sit down with people and talk with them and try and review, because they have fucking jobs. Most people don't just sit and play World of Warcraft all day. If you have people that can do that, if you have leadership that can do that, that's a real huge advantage that my guild has, is that myself and the GM, right? We are the 2 most prominent leaders in that guild. We don't have jobs. We just play WoW. We just sit there and we tinker with strats, and we just do whatever the fuck we want for World of Warcraft all day long. And so we have that advantage where even the people that we can incorporate, people that have jobs that can only raid on 1 character, even though we raid on 4 each, right? Because we have the infrastructure to do it. So yeah, I think that when it becomes so difficult that it begins to interfere with your ability to enjoy the game, yeah, I think that that's where the line is very easily crossed into people not liking it anymore. But I think that, and I'm not sure, what do you guys think? I think that when they add multiple difficulties, when it doesn't feel like hard mode, and it's like, okay, when the gap in the gear isn't as massive, right? When it isn't, okay, 252 versus 232, right? When that's not the difference in gear, I feel like, especially also because it's only 1 piece per week, right, per boss. So it's really, really tough, obviously, other than Algalon. And Algalon being the hardest challenge for most guilds, in terms of gear. Obviously Yogg Zero is probably trickier, but doesn't actually drop any gear. That becomes weird, I think, because you then the real source of a lot of the 252s, the biggest source, is the boss that a lot of people can't kill. And then every other boss is like, if you don't kill it 1 week, you're losing an entire 252 piece, and you need potentially dozens of these pieces.
And it just pushes you back.
Yeah, so I think it's that combination. It's like, I think TOGC, even though TOGC, I think by far the worst tier, is a lot more forgiving when it comes to loot, because you can step into heroic and, you know, kill a couple bosses, and obviously you might not get the chest rewards, you might not get the 45 kills remaining, or, you know, the full 50 kills remaining, but you're not being punished nearly as harshly, even if you go and just do it on normal, because you can get 250 245s on normal, and that difference, it's not the difference between 250, it's not 20 item level.
It is very different. Yeah,
think
that's
there's
why when they
also
buffed
a
the
difference.
items, I never got why they buffed the heroic ones 12 and everything else 6. I was like, why didn't you just buff everything 6? I did not get that at all.
I think they wanted it to be, they wanted that gear to stay relevant longer, but I'm not sure exactly why they did that. I like the you're right. The weird, it's a bit odd, because a lot of people still use the lower level gear, right? So a lot of people still use the 232 stuff. It would have made Death Knights obscenely powerful, is the funny bit about it. But Death Knights would have been ridiculous had they buffed the 232s to 238.
Well, I mean, same with I mean, like, I think the BIS list for Fury Warriors right now is 4-piece tier, which is 232. Like, imagine if the tier was 252, you know?
Yeah, but I mean, they didn't want to, right? Especially when those drop off of normal mobs. There's a question of, oh, well, couldn't you make a thing where, you know, if it's a tier boss and you do it, because all the tier bosses have heroic modes. If it's a tier boss and you have it, you kill it on hard mode, maybe then it should drop a hard mode tier piece. But then that gets really complicated. It gets really like, okay, well, now you're dipping into the TOGC sort of end of things, and it looks a little weird and fucky, and you might not replace your gear going into TOGC. Right, and they wanted most of it to be replaced, but they just didn't want it to be replaced by 10-man gear. They didn't want 10-man TOGC to immediately replace hard mode Old War gear, was the reason that they gave, which I think is a decent reason. It shouldn't just completely invalidate the entire tier.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I like. Yeah, that's what I hated. Back in the day, like, it just went to TOC, and it's like all this work I just did in Old War, and now this is so much easier, and I'm just replacing everything.
And part of the issue as well is that for a lot of healers, I think it was, you know, I heard this. I'm not sure how true this is, because I've heard people say the opposite. I know that it's not true now, but I think it used to be true that before the item level bump on Valinir, that it was outclassed by Lich King weapons on heroic. For healers.
I think I've heard that too.
I've heard that. I don't know if that's actually true. My H-Pal said, no, you're full of shit. And you know, my Druid said, well, I think it's true for some classes. But with the item level bump, it's just straight up not true, because it used to be that Valinir was pretty low item level. So I think that was a good change. And I think a lot of them are good changes. You know, it feels good because you were going to use Flare either way on Mage next patch. So a lot of the strong items that you're going to use throughout, it feels good that they're stronger and that you get a real reward from them, because it feels like a more real tier. And now you have a reason to go back, and you can still play Ulduar, and you only have to do a few bosses now. So I think that's interesting enough. But yeah, I think for a lot of guilds, yeah, I don't know. I'm not in these worst guilds though, so I don't have a good read on the difficulty that they experience in Algalon. Are guilds still really like with their main roster? I'm guessing it's roster boss.
It's hard to tell with Warcraft logs. We've been talking about this in our WCR Discord with a few different people, but you can pull up everybody that's done personal logs, and like for the last 2 weeks, only 34% of personal log raids had downed Algalon in that 2 week span. But then you pull up the guild chart that's got the whole 54 out of 54. For anybody, we got some notes, and if you don't understand the point thing, a lot of the bosses are like 5. Like Yogg, you can get 1, 2, 5 based on if you do 1 keeper, 2 keepers, 3 keeper, 4 keeper, 0 keeper. 0 gives you 5 points. Algalon all like gives you 5 points all the time. Flame Leviathan can be different points. So that's what we're talking about when we talk about 53 or 54, because those are just the runs that are considered full, and 53 is everything but Yogg 1 instead of Yogg 0. So just to get that out there if anybody was confused. But yeah, on that, it still looks like a good 50% of guilds have not killed Algalon. But like, it's weird because like we have 2 raids in my guild. It shows us as killing Algalon, but one of the raids hasn't. Like that's the last boss we have not killed. We got him to 30% last week. It's our more our more casual raid, but like that's like raid that hasn't done it, you know, but like it looks like we have.
Can you run me through that? What does that look like? What is not being able to kill Algalon look like? Like is the tank is constantly dying? Is it people are standing and stuff? Is it the stars are doing too much damage and people are dying from it? It's really got to be one of those three things.
Well, I was
people dying to mechanics. Or
I was the tank. I was one of the tanks. I was the off tank warrior, and I did keep dying. But they figured out. I was like, "Goose, you guys just have to spam me," and then we got that part sorted out. But honestly, it's just been we did it casually.
I mean,
like we didn't even
the first
start.
week you progressed on Algalon, right?
Yeah. This is the first time we've ever touched him because the last week was the first time we downed Mimiron, and we didn't start doing hard modes until 5 weeks in or so. Like, and then we were only doing 1 or 2 prog a week. You know, we weren't trying to. Oh, that's a thing about like Algalon or about Ulduar. That's the thing that makes progression even tougher is that instead of just ramping up difficulty, all the mechanics in different hard modes are completely different from the normal fight. So like it's a whole relearning of each. And so in our main raid, we did that, but we had Algalon down at like week 6, right? But we were doing that and we were progressing early. And then this casual run, we weren't even supposed to do hard modes. It was initially just supposed to be a casual drink some beers raid. But everybody started to want to do them and like a lot of alts in them from the other one. And it's been kind of fun for me just to progress with them. But the gear, we have way less gear. We've dealt with losing tons of people that we've given hard mode gear to. So the gear difference between the 2 raids is completely different. Like completely.
I mean, especially if you're
but so is the skill.
I can't say that. I don't know. I mean,
well, I mean, I guess
I don't know if it's skill. I think it's education on the fights. I think it's just knowing
dedication, right? Or like willingness to even alts, right? Like not all alts. I mean, there's definitely some alts that are very motivated to learn everything about the other class, but you know, there are some people that play an alt, and I was one of them, right? Where I was like, I don't have time to master this class as well as the class that I was playing. Like, just literally, my time does not allow for that, and so. I think there's a lot of that. I think finding 25 people that are content with doing just normal modes is difficult. I think you could find 10
and
easily.
Still progging on some fights.
Right.
Like but you're basically finding people who don't know the fights, you know, and are happy that you're going to take them to learn the fights type of deal, right? So
yeah, and it wasn't the same consistent 25 people there every week. And it was, you know, there's a lot of weeks where you'd start with 20 or 21, right? And so I think that was a lot of the barriers that kind of kept you guys from progressing as
it's been quickly. Fun though to do it. Like I played 3 different, like I played a sweaty casual raid. I played high-end GTKPs where they go faster than my normal raid. And then I play in the casual raid, and it's neat to see all the different faucets. And it felt good when we got Mim down for the first time. I was like, yeah, you know, it was really cool. And I got to do that late in the, you know, it's all about how you think of it. Like some people might be streaming that and be like embarrassed, but I just don't care.
But I would never be embarrassed if I were doing that kind of thing, because I don't think that the group reflects on you. If you're leading the group, maybe you can be embarrassed, right? You know that you haven't, you know, like assembled a great team and that you haven't really explained people and got them up to speed. But if you're just like a raider in a group that's not doing well, so long as you're pressing your buttons fine, it's not that big of a deal. But
well, I was the main tank for a bit though. As warrior, and that was probably griefing my casual raid a bit because
Warrior's not that bad.
They're actually really good if you're in a really top end guild, right? But like it's a completely different healing. Like it's a completely different way to heal and everything. Like so,
yeah, they need way more resources, but they can go faster. Realistically, they have, you know, some good tools for snap thread and for, you know, like AoE situations that or like cleave situations that you really like in speedruns. But I think that begs the question, like ultimately in WoW, right? Skill kind of is just willingness to do well up to the 99th percentile, right? I think
willingness to research, right?
Yeah, I think when you get from 99 above, like if you get into 99 point somethings, right, like 99.1 to 100th percentile players, I think that is where talent that is not particularly teachable. I think that it's usually the last few percentile points. I really think it's like 99.9 and 100 that are really the hard things, where you really have to just be a gamer. But up to that, you can explain to someone, you can get their weak auras up to snuff, you can get their UI really clean, you can explain the fights to them, and so long as they, even if it doesn't even matter if they can't fully, if they aren't equipped in the same way, they could be missing a hand. And most classes, you can do that kind of stuff on there. We have the peripherals, we have the stuff to do, so there's no real excuse to not be that high up, except for a lack of willingness, which is it's a reasonable explanation. But if you want to be good at WoW, it's really not that hard, right? So realistically, I think the gap, sometimes people like to differentiate that, and I'm wondering what you guys think, because I think that skill is up to a certain threshold, up to what I'd say the 99th percentile, is just willingness to do well and having other people that are willing to do the same.
I think it's way lower, just in my experience. Just to give context, my guild would be like 75th percentile, I guess, when we looked at like logs. So we're above average, but we're not even like a hardcore guild. But for example, I mean, there's just a lot of people that try their best, but are incapable of ever consistently parsing above like 90. And they're trying. It's just like, let's say movement, right? A really good player, every single movement, like if they're a caster, they're casting an instant spell while moving. They are having 0% downtime. They're always hitting things, right? And you're just going to find players that, I mean, they're trying their best. It's just they don't have that mindset, and I guess you could try and coach them or train them, but it's not something where I would say like only at the super, super top level you can't teach. I mean, there's some people that just do not pick up on certain things. I mean, you can still clear the content with them, but there's some people that are just never going to be parsing at that level. But the same thing goes for defensives, though, in utility.
Yeah. Yep.
There's some pumpers that are incapable of doing anything correctly. I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah, they won't kick. They won't, they'll wait till the last second and then run off a second too late and drop the void void circle on XT right at the foot, suck everybody over, like that type of deal. They're trying to go for
people
too
dying
much.
To Mimron, the Mimron shock blast, because the big circle you run out of, because they're trying to squeeze every point out. And so it's like, there's some people that, for example, are very good at optimizing every point of damage they can, because they are not at all even thinking about their survivability. They're not using a Hellstone. They're not looking at their health. They're standing in damage. They don't care. So I think it kind of goes both ways, but there's definitely, a large group of people who play this game, and they have very different abilities. I mean, some of it's age, some of it's reaction speed, some of it is just experience playing video games.
Well, and it's weird too, because I told you, like, I play in 3 different skill areas, right? Like on my rogue, that's the most geared in the main guild raid, I'm always trying to push every bit and trying to parse. But then I think I actually play better, but score way lower in my rogue GDKPs, because I'm kicking like every single thing I possibly can. I'm trying to do everything to make the raid easy and chill, and like where we're going to down the boss. And I don't care about my damage, right? So like it's a completely different mindset. So I just wonder if you kind of like,
I think you're
there. Like,
I think the 100th percentile, realistically speaking, and I've changed my mind on this through the years. I think the 100th percentile is the person that's capable of doing both.
Yeah, I think so too.
Because there are the people who can do both. There are the people who can eke out every little bit of damage. Obviously, some mechanics, if you do them, you're just going to lose some damage. But on the ones where you can't, and especially on the ones who, end up being the conductors of the raid, if you end up calling cooldowns and you end up, making sure that the stars are done correctly on Algalon, for instance, and you can still do more damage on everyone else in your class while calling the cooldowns and being aware of which star is at which health, where to go and how to go, where we're killing it, and when the cleave is going to come in, so that you're doing that shit perfectly, while also making sure that your rotation's perfect, that you're filling in those uptime gaps, that you're getting every little bit of damage squeezed out. That's the real cream of the crop. That's the 100th percentile. And that's very, very, very hard to achieve because you have to be locked in. I think it's really hard for people to actually just sit at their computers and only focus on the thing they're doing. I think that oftentimes they have a stream up, they'll be listening to music, they'll be, watching a YouTube video on their second screen, yada, yada, yada. They won't just be playing the game. And so realistically, when I say, okay, I don't think the 99th percentile is all that hard, I don't think a 99th percentile player consistently presses their Healthstone. I really don't. I don't think the average,
a lot of people don't.
I don't think they do. And I'm constantly yelling at this in my guild. And my guild, they love to try and do this to me. They love when I don't press a Healthstone, they love to try and give me shit. It'll be weeks in between whenever I die. If I die and I haven't used a Healthstone, it's weeks in between when they can point that shit out to me. Right? And there's almost always a good reason for it. Sometimes I forget, it's true. But I have the resources and I have the know-how. My fucking screen tells me, and there's an audio cue on my fucking headset whenever I drop below 35% health. And I have it disabled on certain fights where I know that I'm going to be below that percent health for a good reason, and so I don't do it on certain fights. But the lion's share of fights, I have an audio cue, so it's just like, hey, it's not a thing on my screen, it's not occupying, it literally is just like a little blip. And then I know, fuck, I'm low health, and I have my health in the, pretty much in the center of my screen. I know where it is, I know where it should be. And that obviously is a very difficult thing to get people down for, and that kind of uptime meme. I agree on the Mimron thing, actually. Mimron and Algalon, I think, are really hard fights for anyone. Those aren't fights that anyone can just 99, because you do have to have an obscene amount of uptime. You have to move correctly. You have to get lucky in some circumstances. I think those are difficult. But I'm talking more about things like XT or let's say Razor Scale, let's say Ignis. Let's say the more, like sit there and pump kind of bosses, Thorim, for instance. I think that if anyone, pretty much anyone is capable of getting 99s in a group where everyone else also cares and has done probably, and this is the real caveat, probably 15 hours of research into their class and tinkering with your UI and making sure everything is up to snuff, which is a very heavy requirement, obviously. But I think anyone can do it if they spend that amount of time, so long as they spend that time effectively. And that can be the big deal, right? Some people don't know where to go because the guides might not be good. They might not know which ones are right or wrong. They might not know how to talent correctly, because a lot of, like, Fire Mage, for instance, a lot of the talents, it's very interesting, actually, I think, in Wrath. Different people will have different talent trees for Fire, like wildly different talent trees, because, are you a Master of Elements taker? Right? Are you a Burning Soul taker? Are you a Flame Throwing taker? I think that there are answers for each of those things. Are you a 3 out of 3 Student of the Mind taker? I think that there are a lot of good reasons to go various builds for various fights. And so you get a lot of skill expression on the RPG aspect of it. And I think that that's actually very interesting. But I think that when you have a lot of the skill expression through the RPG aspect, I think you're almost always going to be, it's the lion's share of the work is just doing the research, in my opinion.
Well, one thing I would say, you mentioned the 100th percentile player is the one who can, like, make the smart play and do the most damage. I would argue that person is not going to be the 100th percentile on logs usually.
Never.
Because
never.
He wasn't talking about parsing. He was talking about skill.
Listening. Yeah, exactly. Just so
Good
people
point.
listening are clear, you're not going to be 100th percentile DPS log if you are the 100th percentile player. Because like if you're playing Unholy DK, it costs runic power to kick, it costs runic power to press wall. Well, it is correct to kick and use your Icebound Fortitude as a defensive in certain situations. And if you're pressing those things, it's reducing your damage. And there's lots of, that's just a basic example. But yeah, I just want to point that out, but I agree.
Yeah, no, you're almost never going to be, because you're going to be funneling resources. There are certain circumstances in which the best player, right, like the 100th percentile player, can get the 100 parse, but it's almost only when the cringe nonsense is not possible, right? So when the cheese is not, like, for instance, there's a log where Alondo is doing this week, and he saved it for the last week, where they straight up wiped on Freya over and over and over again until they got a Lasher followed by Conservator. And the reason why they did that is so Alondo is basically the only one DPSing those Lashers. He gets 1 million damage in on those Lashers, and then they immediately kill Freya. So everyone else is just DPSing Freya that whole time while he's AoEing these fuckers. He gets to kill all of them, and then so he has a 19,000 DPS parse. What do you think the second highest parse on Freya is for Warlock?
God.
15k?
It's 15k. It's 15k. He is 4,000 DPS above. And based on the way the All-Stars works, it's percentile from the highest parse is what you determine. So he literally, I believe he just like 25% reduction in points of every other player on that fight universally, because he's number 1 and number 2 is 25% lower. And it's fucking, like that kind of shit is fried. That kind of shit's fried beyond belief. Obviously, Alando is a very, very good DPSer, but yeah, the 100th parse is not the 100th percentile player. Almost never.
Yeah.
And I did want to jump in on like the general difficulty stuff.
Yeah. I was going to go back to you on that because we kind of went further.
Yeah. So, I mean, given the context again, I run a guild. So I want the game to be easy for a million reasons. Because again, I'm not in a super hardcore guild. I would like this far into the tier for if we're missing our best healer, our core Holy Paladin without Valinir, I would love for the raids to not be so dicey if we don't have a ton of resourceful players that are insanely good at respecking and stuff. Obviously, the better guilds have a lot of people who can slot in and alt and stuff. But for example, if you're missing key people, I would still say Old War, it can be rough. If you have to switch out a tank on Algalon, if they're not experienced, I mean, this is just kind of a thing that maybe a lot of people don't run into. But my guild does not really have an excess of tanks that are able to use a mic and communicate and can also like play a tank. So we would be in situations where we might have to slot in a tank that doesn't have a mic on Algalon, and they're like typing 3, 2, 1 taunt like out. It's just not good. So on the difficulty section, I personally, this is my personal opinion, I would prefer if Classic were easier. So because I found the most fun that I've had in Classic is when there's a very large spectrum of player skill within the guild, within the same raid. And I know that a lot of people would assume that a lot of really good players only want to be in the pumper guilds. That's actually not necessarily true.
Yeah, it's not true
I've
at
had
all.
a lot of really good players in vanilla Classic that could have been in amazing guilds, but they were there for social reasons. It was a fun environment. When the raids are easy, I think you can construct the raid socially, if that makes sense. Like it's the people you want to play with most. As the raids get harder, you might have to replace or bench people that are fun to play with, but aren't good enough. So that's just my personal opinion. I understand a lot of people want the raids to keep getting harder. So, I mean, maybe it shouldn't necessarily change, but my preference would be one difficulty, vanilla or TBC, easier difficulties, because I think that's better socially for the game.
I think I agree with you. And like people will make the argument, well, you don't have to do hard mode, but I beg to differ. Like everybody wants to do the thing that's going to get them the best gear. Like if the hard modes were just titles and just like mounts and different things that like didn't make you more powerful, people would be a lot less annoyed by doing the non-hard modes. Like,
agree.
I really think that's true.
You would directly incentivize against it though, right? Like for pretty much everyone. So I think there's a comfortable medium, and I think the comfortable medium we achieve later on. For instance, if you don't right now, right, the biggest upgrade for Mage, this entire tier, right? And it's probably bigger than pretty much in terms of if you're looking at second bis to bis items. Flare is pretty much better than any other upgrade. Like it's better than pretty much half the upgrades combined from second bis to bis on Mage. There's no real functional alternative. And if you cannot do Vezak's hard mode, right? Not that difficult of a hard mode, but if you can't do Vezak's hard mode,
it's the most annoying.
You have no access to it. You have absolutely zero chance of getting the item. And I think that's the thing that TOGC and later on does well. If you want to have multiple difficulties, give people a comparable item that's just worse, right? Give them an item that, okay, so you can have Reign of the Dead. Your Reign of the Dead is just worse now. You can have a Flare. Your Flare is just worse now. You can have Tier. You can have the Tier set. Your Tier is just worse now. It's not that you fundamentally have no access to a Comet's Trail that completely changes how Unholy Death Knight is played, right? It's that you have an access to a worse version of it. I think if they want to go with multiple difficulties, it's important to make the change in gear not feel like an in-group and an out-group, just feel like a better version. I think if they go for that, I think it's important.
And maybe slightly better instead of absurdly better.
Exactly. So like 13 item level is a lot more realistic than 20, right? Like 20 is insane. But I think the bigger problem is it's not just 20. It's that there's no alternative item. Pharaoh's gloves, for instance. It's not that they're 20 item levels better. They're like functionally 30 item levels better than anything else because of the way that they're fucking itemized. They're insane. Like it's an insane piece. that you don't just have a statted down version of for people who can normally do the boss, because the boss is only available on hard mode, right? Because obviously those drop from Algalon. So I think that you get this weird dichotomy where the players suffer, and especially when it's a longer raid and it takes people a long time to do these bosses. So it's like your raid. I'm guessing that's the reason you were explaining it earlier. It's just it took too long to kill Mimron, right? So it just took forever to actually even be able to attempt Algalon at all. Right.
Yep. And we just weren't doing some of the stuff. And roster boss, if only 22 were there, we would just go through and just do normal. And we could do normal, in under 3 hours, but then like if we had enough people, we could have progressed the next day. But like we also had the Super Bowl, like it's a weekend raid, which makes things really hard. Like, cause the Super Bowl, we did a one night raid where we just cleared through everything as fast as we could, a couple hard modes and stuff like that. So it's just been kind of a struggle with that one the entire time, but yeah, it's going to get even, dude, you talk about like, so there's some things like say the rune stone, like you're going to have to do sidereal, essence to get that. Like there's no way to get that now after the patch. Like, and that's, I'm pretty sure, BIS for Warriors next phase 2. It's BIS in a lot of situations for Combat Rogue next phase. So it's kind of crazy. Like you're gonna have to do dungeons now.
I like that though. I think that the things that they've changed about Wrath, like people have bitched and moaned about some of the things. Obviously, people have a lot of opinions on the token. But I think the things that they've changed by and large have been really, really good. So I think that we're pointing to the sidereal essence, giving people a real reason to go in dungeons, and making it easier to gear alts moving forward with like the last tier's gear. I think that is compelling. I think that the things that they're doing with the Valenier shards, extremely compelling. I think across the board, they're doing a lot of compelling stuff in terms of making, in terms of incentivizing us to play the way that we want to and in fun ways. So I think 5-mans are fun. I think that they're too easy. And so they solve that in one swoop, right? They give us a reason to do 5-mans. Right, and they give us a reason to and a way to gear our alts without really pulling teeth and having to do more World of War 10s, because everyone's sick of doing World of War 10 man in my guild. I don't know if it's the same with you guys, but I'm the one running them, and I've never stopped running them. Every other officer in my guild has stopped running them. They won't run them. They won't touch it with a 10-foot fucking pole, and I have to do it every goddamn week. And the announcement of the sidereal stuff is the only thing that got me able to stop doing 3 of them. Because realistically, we wouldn't need that gear for next phase. Because a lot of people still use, or Nebulband is almost as good as like your BIS option, right? It's the same thing with Runestones, the same thing with, things like Band of Lights, the Vezak's Cloak, Caresses. There's a lot of really good stuff there.
Yeah. Well, I guess I have a problem with the amount. Like, if I don't end up getting Runestoned, like, I guess Monday's when my rogue's going to go. If I don't get runes, I've got it on my other 2 characters, but if I don't get it on him, that's 19 freaking dungeons I got to run. That's a lot. And then if you want one of the swords, one of the 2-headed swords, that's 38 dungeons.
Well, I don't think it. I'm pretty sure it still drops the hard mode gear.
No,
you could still.
Does
it does. It does, because it doesn't drop the 25-man hard mode gear from 10-man.
Correct. So you can still get it to drop.
Yeah, you can still go farm a runestone.
Oh, okay. Well,
it's the same thing on.
That's not that bad. Then
you're just given another option. You're just given another option if it's not dropping. Some people have done it 20 times and haven't seen it once, right? So I think it's a more realistic option for them. Yeah. So they didnn't do the thing with Nax where
I didn't realize that. Gear, I thought the hard mode. Okay, that makes a lot more sense.
Swapped. It's only the 10-man gear. So the 10-man normal gear is now on the 5-man tables. The 25-man normal gear is on the 10-man table. But the hard mode 25-man gear is only on hard mode 25, and the hard mode 10-man gear is only on hard mode 10-man. But you can now buy the hard mode 10-man stuff with the sidereal essence.
Okay. Then that's not that's.
I think there are some issues with, and I was, although dare I say this? Dare I mention this? No, I won't mention that. I was looking at the prices for sidereal essence though. Some of them don't really make a lot of sense. Like Ice Core staff costs the same amount as a Suga. That doesn't really add up, because it's like, okay, one's a fucking staff, the other is a main hand. Maybe they should cost different amounts, and that's kind of across the board. So it just makes it And it's not that big of a deal, but there are some prices that are a little suspicious.
It's just a lot of dungeons to run.
It is a lot of dungeons. And for like a BIS piece, that makes a lot of sense, right? Like if it's a Nebula band and if it's Algalon Gear General, for sure, make it 19 dungeons or whatever it is. I think it is 19 dungeons. Make it that. That makes sense.
Wish there was like a time component or something, like, you know, like a little mini, a little mini ZA,
I'd like that.
Right?
I'd like that. That would be cool. That would be really interesting.
And and then it would also say you have to kill all bosses, but then if you beat the time by a certain time, you get 3. If you beat it by the next time, you get 2, and if you just beat it normal, you just get 1. Right? Like that would make it fun. I don't know.
Yeah.
Then they're adding M plus.
I mean, but that's kind of what that's kind of what they want with this, though, right? Like they're trying to add, you know, augments to the dungeons in order to make the rewards better and more relevant in later patches. That's basically the system, right? Why wouldn't they add timing to it?
Yeah, just because I say this all the time, just because something is in retail doesn't make it inherently bad. Like there's lots of things I like about retail. I think there's a lot I don't.
I'm going to tell you now. I just realized why they won't do that. The amount of work that would need to go into implementing that would probably be very high.
You think so?
Yeah, because they have to, like, there's no current timing system for dungeons. It's not in the game, right? Obviously they can pull from the retail tool because they're, you know, like they're forked, but they would have to fully implement the retail tool and fully QA that. And obviously they're, you know, a relatively small team. They'd have to develop over it and then test it the fuck out of it. And they're already undermanned. Right. So that's probably why if you were to go and ask, if you were to shake Agrand down and be like, Agrand, this is a great idea, why don't you do this? He'd probably be like, well, you know, it'd probably take, you know, it would probably be an unrealistic amount of effort.
Yeah.
For the team to undergo when they have so much on their plate already.
I'm like the only one I think out of everybody that doesn't actually know Agrand and has never talked to him. But I am
not in the Shadow Cabal.
I am a fan. I am a fan. But yeah.
I really, really, really like Agrand. I think he's dope. That's my biggest issue with I don't know if I'm allowed to say Voldemort's name here, but that's my biggest issue with Alex's rants and stuff. And that's part of the reason why he banned me from his Discord, because I was trying to go talk some reason to them, and they were like, oh, let's basically I was in there and they were, you know, they're on their conspiracy nonsense, and they were like, oh yeah, we should just spam tweet Agrand about this dumb thing that we think, and basically try and corner him and make him feel bad. And I was like, well, that's another human being.
Right.
He clearly cares about the game. Like, you might not agree with what he thinks, and you might not even think that he cares about the game. I think that's a really foolish thing. Reflect for a moment. If you really think that this man does not care about the game, come on, right? Like, he doesn't have to do what he does. And they're like, well, he's in these Discords, he's in this, he's in that. He has private contact with all these people. It's like, don't you want the producers of the game? Don't you want the people who are developing the game to have personal relationships with the people who play it?
I think they think that he gives them
for that.
insider information.
No, they do.
But he doesn't.
It's horseshit. It's horseshit. He fucking doesn't. Because they never say that out loud, though. They're like, oh, well, they get special treatment. It's like, what do you mean they get special treatment? They're like, oh, well, he was banning griefers on hardcore. It's like, good.
Dude,
good.
Like, yeah, guys.
Is that a fucking problem? And then they reveal that they're the griefers, right? Then they're like, well, people should be able to grief. And it's like, okay, all right, cool. Like, I now see you. The mask is off.
Just to clear up something for people, I have a few friends that are actually really good friends at Blizzard. They don't tell me anything. And like, honestly, the only time you might get a Blizzard employee, and I have not gotten one to do it, but some people have, is in person when they're drunk at BlizzCon. And that's it. Like, they're not going to put shit into writing. Like, they're just not going to. Like, and good creators aren't going to ask them to. Like, it's
and
not
they don't jeopardize the relationship with, you know, they have, and it's a very important relationship to have. Obviously, you might, and I don't think it's illegitimate, have an issue with, you know, the fact that content creators play the role in the ecosystem that they now do. I think that's a legitimate concern. I think that there are concerns with that, but the concern should not be, I don't think the response should be, and maybe I'm not the person to say it, but I don't think the response should be, okay, let's harass the fuck out of them now because we don't like the way that they work in this ecosystem. Because, like it or not, content creators play a very important role in the ecosystems now. Like, they're essential to the marketing of games, they're essential to how games are played nowadays because people engage with them in very different ways than we did back in 2006, right? So it, you know, as much as you might dislike the way that they participate in the atmosphere, Agron doesn't just participate with content creators either, right? Like that's not just the thing. He used to be very aggressively on Som because Som was, you know, like one of a baby project of his, and he would just hang out in people's discords and listen as they were testing the content. That's not to give them special treatment. That was to make sure the content was correct. He gets
he's going above and beyond. Like
far beyond what is asked of him. And if you think that's some weird cabal, you know, cult thing to try and gain acumen, you're fucking fried, because he doesn't, you know, like he doesn't stream. If he wanted that attention, he would stream, and he doesn't. He just does it because he cares about the game and he likes games.
Yep.
Right. Like, and you might disagree with that. But, you know, like, think about it for a moment, reflect on it. Really. Like there are other things that this man could be doing if he didn't give a shit. Right. There really are. Mm-hmm. It's not some fucking conspiracy. Right. It's just that you disagree, which is OK. But fucking, you know, don't be psychos about it. Is the only real. I feel like that's a good rule for most.
There's been a lot of people that have wanted me to bring He Who Must Not Be Named on the show, and I'm like, dude, that's dangerous. Like, no, like, his content is borderline illegal in some states. There could be some stuff going down. I have no idea what he's going to say. Like, you know,
I think he just doesn't appreciate I think a lot of people don't appreciate the human element. I think that's the real thing here, that it's like, it's real people, and it's like, okay, well, just because they're people doesn't mean they should be free of criticism, sure, but at the end of the day, right, you have to really try and think and realize that people aren't all out to get you, and that, like, this whole he's just trying to tear people down, and I think that's the real issue. If it were legitimately constructive, constructive, cool. There are great constructive criticisms of Blizzard. There's a lot to be had, right? Like, there's a lot of constructive criticism that we have on the, you know, like Josh and I on the last countdown call that I was on. We were there. We were ready to lambast the token. Yes, we're trying to be as human as possible about it, but there's a lot of bad reasons. Right, like there's a lot of good reasons the token shouldn't be implemented. There's a lot of damage that it could potentially do, right? Like we saw not a whole lot of upside to it, right? Does that mean that we need to start, like, personally attacking people and digging through their social medias and really trying to get personal with it? No, and I think that's the line. That's the line.
Looking for any mistake they made in their past. I mean, it's just.
Yeah, and I'm sure that he's against that kind of thing in general. I'm sure if you really talk to him and you got him to be good faith for a moment, I'm sure he doesn't like some of the worst parts of cancel culture. Most people don't like every bit of the way that culture has, you know, swung in terms of being very flighty and very, okay, now this person has done a wrong in the past, and so now let's eliminate them, right? Let's cancel them. A lot of people dislike that, and I think they have very good reason to. And I think it's deeply hypocritical to participate in a thing that you hate just because you want to, you know, see something burn. Right. And I'm no like, I think that ultimately, if you had to sit me down and really, really nail me in a corner, I think that ultimately World of Warcraft has been negative for the MMO space. I think if you had to, in summation, if you had to sit down and really do the math and parse through it, I think that World of Warcraft has been bad for MMOs in general. I think that it's stifled them for years. I think we're almost to the point where we've overcome the damage that it's done, and that other MMOs can start, like, potentially growing again. But I think that World of Warcraft has been a overwhelming negative for the MMO space. Does that mean
it's been a monopoly, right?
Exactly. And in a lot of the bad ways, and it's reinforced a lot of bad systems that people have thought that are necessary. And so, right, and I sincerely think that, and I'm still not going to go out and try and, you know, just make people foam at the mouth and just actively revile other people just because I disagree with the way that things go, because often it's not as simple as, ooh, bad person does bad thing. It's you know, it's a very complicated landscape of game. The fact that it's even lived this long is weird and fucky, and it's hard to nail it down and be like, ooh, this one person is responsible, and they're trying to do that, and it's horseshit. Mm-hmm. It's fucking horseshit. It's not the way that anything works.
Yeah. Well, let's bring it back to Zatara. You did have a few things that you wanted to say, some grievances to air about Wrath of the Lich King. I asked you to come on. So, I mean, you know, we try to be positive on this show, but we also are negative at times. It's just, you know, we try to generally be positive, but let's hear these, and let's see if maybe it's something that, you know, we hadn't even thought of.
Well, and I guess it's less of me being negative about Wrath and more of me, I guess, appreciating Classic or Vanilla or TBC would be as my favorite versions of WoW and my preferences. That's the main thing, because I personally feel like in Wrath the Lich King, you probably can find a lot to do if you only want to raid and you're interested in raiding multiple characters, alts, splits, GDKPs, whatever. Mm-hmm. But if you want to do anything but raid, I honestly think, well, personally, I don't think there's anything really to do. We kind of mentioned before PvP's in a bad state. I mean, you guys would probably know about Battlegrounds. Battlegrounds have been, dead forever because, whether it be botting, whatever it is, what is there to do at 80? Because gold doesn't really matter anymore. At least not in the only relevancy for gold is GDKPs.
Yep.
So if you go do some dailies, that's not cutting it in GDKPs. You either walk in with 20,000 gold or gold doesn't matter to you because it's basically free to get consumes. It costs like nothing to maintain your character. So in summary, I think that the game is incredibly boring, except if you enjoy the raiding. And I personally have never been a raid first player, despite the fact that I found myself running a guild. In vanilla, I raided for PvP. And then in TBC, I just had a lot of passion for my main and I just really liked playing my character. But now I hit Wrath and I don't have like a main I really feel a lot of passion for. And I'm kind of left with, well, raiding is just the only thing to do in the game. And if that is not doing it for you, what else is there to do? And then the thing I would say that multiplies it is I think Blizzard has done a horrible job with the phases in Wrath. I think it is disgusting what they've done. Like actually so frustrating because I run a guild. How do I convince someone to come to my raids for the 5th month of Old War and the new patch is not out yet after 4 months of Nax? How is that possible? How do I convince they come to me and they say, I want to quit the game. I'm not having fun. What do I even say back to them? I'm like, yeah, me too. Oops. Did I say that? Why 5 months of Old War and we're going to have to do it for 4 more months, at least in TOGC because of how they buff the items, right? So 9 to 10 months of Old War in a row. Come on. But yeah, that's where I'm at. If you like raiding, could be good. If you don't, I think the game is in very bad shape if you're not a raid only player.
I think the same thing is true of TBC though, realistically, right? I've been on this train for a long time. I think Wrath is it is just a different version of TBC. The classes are a little more complex. The raids are a little more complex. The raid comps are different because of how Lust works. I think Wrath ends up just being a slightly improved version of TBC outside of the fact that 2 of the tiers are actually god-awful. I think TOGC and Nax are terrible, and I think that's what puts TBC above, because in a normal circumstance, TBC would have T5 out from the beginning, and so you get T5, then you get T6, and then you get Sunwell. All amazing tiers. Whereas in Wrath, you get a Nax tier, which is god-awful, and then you get TOGC, which is also god-awful. Right. Whereas ICC and Old War stand as pillars of the thing, but that's half the expansion. Right.
What I would push back is the differences between Wrath and TBC were, number one, just how the pace of gearing works in TBC was very different, such that dungeons were relevant like infinitely longer. I guess you can argue this might get remedied with some of the changes they're making to dungeons, but at least up to this point, the Heroic Plus, anyone who thinks Heroic Plus is a good system is insane. Go into the Oculus for 5 seconds and you see 46 mirror images in front of your screen and you just want to leave. It's just not fun. It's not well done. Right?
I think these new ones are going to be more fun with the buffs. I think.
I don't mind the mirror image mechanic. It's interesting. Like it's an actual way of wiping, right? Like it's a little annoying if you don't have a class that's good at it. But like, you legit, I have to go in there. I have to press abilities I normally wouldn't. I have to ice lance. I would like never ice lance. I don't mind them that much. I don't think that the heroics stayed all that relevant all that long in TBC either. And the reason that they was literally for attunements, right at the start.
They did. I believe they updated the every time they would update the badge vendor, there'd be a little more relevance to do them. I just preferred, again, this is just kind of like everything more classic-y about a game. I'm probably going to prefer it more. So like in Wrath of the Lich King, with how threat works and with how mana works and how classes work, you kind of just stomp dungeons. It's just a different pacing. Whereas in TBC, I mean, I don't know how it was for other people. There were genuinely heroics I could not do day one, like just because of how difficult they were, or we had to do crazy stuff. Like I remember we couldn't do Blood Furnace day one because it was just rough. And then Old Hillsbrad, we had to do some crazy like kiting. Old Hillsbrad heroic was very hard. And that at least...
Oh yeah, they were definitely hard.
Yeah, I think the difficulty is the big difference there. I think that the Wrath heroics are just, they're fucking face roll. If that's your complaint, if that's the big difference that you're, yes, 100%. I take issue with that as well.
But even in like Sunwell patch, I really liked Magister's Terrace. And even in Sunwell patch, if I went into Blood Furnace, we can still wipe in Blood Furnace and Sunwell patch. It's not like these mobs punching people just stopped deleting non-tanks. So again, it's just my preference because I had a character I had a lot of passion for, and I just wanted to play the character. I just wanted to play the character in dungeons. I felt like there was enough to do in TBC because you needed gold more. And I feel like nowadays, if I knew someone, do you guys know anyone that does professions at all? Because I know one person who picks herbs in all of my WoW circle, all of my guild. I know one person who picks herbs, and that person and one other person fish. So I know like that's it.
I mean, I do it.
A couple of fishermen, but yeah, I don't know any herbers. I don't know any miners.
You see what I mean? Like,
do it all.
Who's gonna go out and mine right now?
Well, it's because it doesn't make like I did a ton of mining the first week of Wrath of the Lich King, and I made a ton of money on it. Right? I did a ton of blacksmithing at the start of each tier in TBC because I knew people were going to buy the resist gear. Like, and I made a ton of cash, and I stopped. Right? Like. I don't keep doing it. Like I try to capitalize on what's going to be big by researching what's coming prior, right? Yeah. I think a lot of people do that. That's why you don't see people doing that. But I still have mining on my warrior. And if I see I mine to mine today in Old War.
In TBC, I felt like I had to go back into farming gold because I was running out of money. I think that is a good point. I had to play the game in some capacity to generate money. I understand GDKPs are the big thing now, to make gold and then to spend gold. But I just feel like so much of the world is, and I would agree that vanilla did a lot of what I'm saying best. TBC wasn't quite as good, but for me, it hadn't crossed the line of like, I mean, now it feels like the only thing to do is raid. And I've never been like raid is my favorite thing. So I just don't really feel like logging into the game like ever. I would rather play
it's weird
other versions of the game.
I've changed, and raiding is now my favorite thing. And I haven't even PvP'd at all in Wrath. And this is the opposite of what I always was before, right?
Oh,
but
vanilla,
it's what you'd have to do.
Yeah, I know vanilla. I literally it was the same exact thing. I PvE'd to PvP, but right, like it's a fundamentally different. You're not PvEing to PvP in TBC. It's just not happening. The gear systems are entirely different. Resilience completely flips the script. So you have your instance PvP, and that's the only thing that you could be doing. Whereas in vanilla, world PvP is relevant because world bosses are prominent and important. They're more important in TBC because they still exist, right? Like Doomwalker and Lord Kazakh, or is it Doomwalker? Is that the name of the fucking Bell Reaver? Anyway, the world bosses exist and they're real, and yeah, but like the servers are already fucked by then, so they were extremely one-sided. So.
Which makes world PvP rough.
Yeah, so it didn't really, like, it had already been dead by then. So, right, like, those are the fundamental differences for me. I actually agree on that, though. I hadn't thought about the way that professions are fundamentally changed, actually. But I'm not a gatherer. I was doing GDKPs in TBC. So I never needed to gather. I was never a gatherer, except for in phase 1 of Classic. And even in phase 1 of Classic, I had a profession for maybe like, you know, the first 3 weeks. And I remember I swapped to herbalism one day. I was like mining. I just love mining. And I swapped to herbalism for one day. I gathered 20 Black Lotus, and then I swapped out of herbalism. I literally had one day and I got 20 Black Lotus in a day, and I was like, I'm never going to top this. This is the highest high we're ever going to get. We are never reaching even remotely close to this ever again. Dropped it, re-leveled mining. We just couldn't do it. Actually, I re-leveled skinning, and I just sat in crater. So it wasn't, it's I think it is tricky, but then that brings us to the last sort of question is then, does Cataclysm do that better? I think Cataclysm is a better raid simulator, and its heroics are more compelling, especially if they release them in a pre-nerf state. Even if they don't release them in a pre-nerf state, they're significantly more challenging and significantly more rewarding than the current version of heroic implementation. Maybe not than Heroic Plus, but I think a lot of your questions are answered by like the current implementation of Heroic Plus, right? Like the current, not the like next patch, right? I'm going to be doing a shit ton of 5-mans to gear my alts, and that feels good because that's what we did in TBC, right? We did 5-mans. Why? It was to gear alts, get badges, and it was to do attunements for our alts. Because after the first few weeks, you had no need of doing a heroic pretty much ever, right? Unless it was for someone's alt or for a new character that was being spun up. And that's the same thing now. It's going to be the same exact shit. You're going to be doing your 5-mans for the Sidereal Essence. Why? It's to gear up alts or to get new players or you get new characters up to snuff, right? If people are coming back from breaks.
Well, the tricky thing for me, and this is a new problem, was now I just am comparing. I don't really compare Wrath to TBC much anymore because like I kind of explained where I was at and I kind of preferred TBC. The problem is now I'm comparing it to retail. And I think retail is like finally okay. You gotta understand, I have hated retail forever. I was the one complaining about retail being terrible for so long. I think every expansion up to Dragonflight, I didn't even like Legion. A lot of people really like Legion. Like retail people like Legion. I thought the game was terrible for like 8 years at least. But now I compare it to Wrath and I'm like, you're telling me about all these dungeon things. I just can't see having more fun in a Wrath dungeon than in a retail dungeon because they have been working on retail Mythic Plus systems for how many years in a row now? Whereas the Wrath team is like throwing stuff at dungeons, just hoping it works out. So their first iteration I thought wasn't very good. Maybe the second will be better. But that's where I'm at now is when I compare Wrath to retail, I feel like it is a retail version of the game. I think the big difference is Wrath is really easy to get into. I think Kata will be really easy to get into. I think retail is currently too confusing for a new player because they don't know what quests they're supposed to be doing. There's all these systems you need to leverage to make your character more powerful. And if you don't know the optimal way to craft gear in retail right now, you're trolling. If you don't know which outdoor content gives you a benefit and which is worthless, you're wasting your time. So that's the problem with retail right now is I think it is too confusing to get into, but
it is super confusing.
I think if you can get past that, I think it is going to be better than a lot of the next upcoming versions of like Kata, Mop, WAD. Like these expansions are much more modern and much more comparable to retail. And I'm not sure I would rather play them than retail just because retail is recently good.
I think that the problem that a lot of people have, and I share this problem, is just that the classes I think are, and the fights, right? So if you're a raider, if you're an M+ player, I think this is actually very different. I think if you're an M+ player, the case for retail is impossibly good, right? Like it's the best kind of like that is the thing that Blizzard is now doing best compared to any other game. I haven't seen another game do 5-man content better, right? That is the best 5-man content that's currently available, hands down. I do not see an exception to that. Everything else is samey and awful, right? Like PvPers are constantly bitching about PvP. PvP is fine. It's fun. It's really in crowd, out crowd. Solo shuffle's cool. I haven't really played with it a lot, so I don't have any really well-formed opinions on it. I'm sure the PvP is fine, or maybe even good. But I'm not an arena player, so it's not really for me. I'm a world PvPer and I'm a raider, right? And I also like 5-man content. So I'm definitely disappointed by the lack of 5-man content. But the raiding and retail, I go in, and if it's not on Mythic, right, and I go in on Heroic, week 1, every single boss to me feels pretty much exactly the same. Like there is no real functional like whereas we're on Mimron, right? I'm doing crazy bullshit that's only on Mimron. You know, it's only on Mimron that you do Mimron shit. It's only on XT that you do XT shit. It's only on Algalon that you do Algalon shit. Every fight feels very distinct and very separate. And it's still, from what I recall, this is a very long time ago, and I haven't played Kata private servers. From what I recall from Kata, it's much of the same. The fight design still feels relatively classic-y. It's not, okay, every X amount of seconds there's a swirly, and every X amount of
you
and every
definitely
Y
don't
amount of
see
seconds
those
there's a frontal.
graphics on the ground
Yeah.
and everything like I see in
Agreed.
VODs
And
of
I hate
retail.
that. I hate that. I hate the fucking swirlies, man. I hate that every fucking boss has a fucking frontal and a fucking swirly and a stack and a spread. It's every boss. It's the same shit. Every fucking boss. The rating is so unoriginal, and I don't really blame them for it because they can't recycle. They're recycling old shit. With M+, it doesn't feel bad because those are unique mechanics to those dungeons, and they leverage old content really effectively. The old content is the cornerstone of M+ a lot of the time. And that's really, they've done a superb job with that. But they don't do that with rating, right? Unless you want to consider time walking, which is horseshit. Don't consider that. And so what you're left with is every boss feels samey as fuck minus one mechanic that's slightly different. It's like, ooh, cool.
Classes too,
Echo of
from what I hear.
Nilfarian. Yeah, well, I mean, every class
Like,
is their
if
18
you're-
fucking walls and their 1 immunity and their fucking 15 cooldowns for, and like their 1 mobility spell, right? That's like, changed by the evoker that gives them a, reduced cooldown on their 1 mobility spell. And so everyone has the same tools to the same thing. And so everything looks the same because all the tools are the same from the classes, right? And so all the encounters are the same.
Like
And
the gear, you
gear
could
is
like
just
basically,
item level.
yeah,
It's
you
item
basically could just swap from tank to DPS. Your gear is exactly the same for the most part, from what I've heard. Like,
Yeah,
That's
obviously
true.
There's some stat prioritization there. It's like, okay, I want to switch from fire to, if I want to switch from Fire Mage to Frost Mage, Fire Mage is terrible right now, right? Say I want to switch from Frost Mage to Arcane Mage right now in retail. Our main stat is, right, like they're both mastery, and then it's mastery versus haste, and then it's mastery versus like crit, right? And you're not even stacking that much of your second best secondary anyway, so it doesn't really matter all that much. It's not going to be all that functionally different. I'm not going to be geared really all that differently. Whereas in Classic, in Wrath, it still feels like, oh, okay, well, I have to get to my right hit rating percentage, and if you're this, you have to socket some more expertise, et cetera, et cetera. And in Kata, it's going to feel the same way. Obviously, there's going to be reforging involved, and so you're just going to have another tool to be like, okay, how do I hit my hit cap? How do I get my expertise cap? Right, like what kind of crit are we looking for? How are we going to re-itemize gear? So you're still thinking about your character.
I actually like that part a lot. I like
I do
reforging.
too. I really like.
I think
reforging.
it's neat.
Yeah.
I hate reforging actually.
I like reforging because it makes more gear viable, right? Like if a gear has like if a piece of gear normally would be bad because it's all one stat, right? Like it makes it okay. This is a crit. This is a crit spell power piece. Okay, I can re-itemize a bit of this crit for haste, and so you can have these weird and interesting setups. I think their issue with it and the reason they removed it might be your problem with it, which is people just use tools to optimize, which feels shit. That's true.
Well, yeah, so where I'm at is not, and I guess I should have been a little more clear. Everything we've said, I think is valid here, but just to be clear, I don't think that like, oh my God, look at retail. It's a great game. Why don't we just play that over Kata? What I'm saying is I would rather play Vanilla Plus than Kata. I want to go the other direction.
I think most
people would.
So
I want it to be more classic, because like right now you mentioned how item level is boring in retail. Well, Wrath of the Lich King is so much closer to item level just deciding every piece than
agreed.
TBC or vanilla were. So we're already going that direction. And I think reforging makes it even worse. If you have reforging in the game, you can just roll neat on anything and at least tweak it more towards your spec. Whereas like right now, if I see something with armor pen, it's like, oh, armor pen. I'm playing on Holy Death Knight. All right. Not an item for me. Right. But if reforging is in the game and now you can roll on every item, you just, sure, you might have something slightly better, but I think item level is going to become more of an issue where you just kind of want everything with the right item level, which I think is really boring and unfun.
Well, they kind of standardize item level, and like after this patch, item level is pretty standardized anyway. Like the best stuff is always going to be offering the most item level, pretty much with very few exceptions.
Yeah, which I think is sad because that's not how Classic was.
It doesn't make it as unique.
Yeah, and I think a good like a good case for Classic is it is the more classic-y bits, right? That's what makes vanilla fun. I roll around with, what do I roll around in my bags right now? With a gajillion haste pots and like a bunch of bombs and stuff and like sappers, and a lot of that's true vanilla, but I didn't have like the Gorillion trinkets that I had in vanilla, and I loved that. That was so much fun.
Trinkets,
like, I loved
TBC too. Like every trash pack, I would swap out trinkets on my warriors so I could just have as much uptime on trinkets as possible, which was actually really fun.
People do still do that in speedruns. Like there still are trinkets to swap to, but realistically, nothing is compared to the way it was in vanilla, because like in raiding, a lot of skill expression on Mage was how you swap your trinkets. In Nax patch, how you swap your trinkets was huge, because like how are you using your Eye of Diminution? How are you using your Fetish, right? How are you using your toe up when it's off, your Xanalar and Hero Charm? If you have a Saffron's Eye, obviously that's going to be pretty easy to use compared to the other ones. But, if you don't have that, you're
Diamond Flask healing set.
Exactly. You have so many like weird and quirky, like dumb bullshit that's just fucking awesome.
Okay, so let me bring this up though. Like, so my favorites in order is Wrath, Vanilla, TBC. I wasn't a huge fan of TBC, I'll be honest with you. It's very like sci-fi, and I don't really. I like sci-fi, but like not that type of sci-fi. I don't know. But either way, I love how the classes. I've played a bunch of different classes in Wrath now, and I just love the way everything feels. Like the rotations feel good. Like everything is more challenging. Like I'm actually with Combat Rogue. This will be the first tier that we end out that I don't have mostly 99s. Like that's cool. I just keep getting to improve every week, and like. That was not the case in vanilla. Like I could play warrior and 99 parse all over the place. Like, and it's just, I don't know. Like I like vanilla more, but I love mounts at 20. Like I love, I just
like
love stuff.
That's actually I feel like that's an unpopular opinion for me to hate. I hate mounts at 20.
I think a lot of people hate it. I mean, but you hate. You hate flying too. I remember the first time we met. I got you on home Twitter, and
if you were like, if you don't hate flying and insert current year, right? You're fucking fried.
That's what you said. You said something like, you said something like, was it 2020 or 2021? But you were like, something about. You're for flying in 2021. Yikes. And I was like, yes, I am. And then I put a gif of a dude going down one of those old people stair things really slow. And I said to each their own. I thought it was I cracked myself up on that one, but it was so funny.
Flying is fucking terrible. I fucking hate flying.
Do you like dragon flying? Because I love that.
No, because you know why? This is a really bad reason. It's fine. I don't mind it. It's not like I hate it. It's just a cheap copy of the Guild Wars 2 system.
That's what I've heard
years prior. So it's just like, and it's fine. It feels good. It feels fine. It's a little too gated behind the improvements, whereas like the Guild Wars system is not as gated behind the improvements to it. It is also. But the way that you get the improvements in Guild Wars involves you playing more of the actual game, so I minded that a little bit less. It does feel, I don't know. I also just don't like flying in general. I prefer that to normal flying though. Dragon flying over normal flying, I have less issues with Dragonflight type flying. If it were less powerful, if it were the base version where you have none of the upgrades in Dragonflight, I would have
those changed a lot. Yeah, those changed a lot.
I would have basically no issue with it. But because of the upgrades that make it so that you can literally fly indefinitely, that's part of my issue. With like fly indefinitely in every situation. Whereas like if you fall off of something and you're like if you're at the highest point ever, yeah, you can fly all the way to the bottom. I'm fine with that. But then trying to get up, it's a lot of running. It's a lot of like having to reclimb. I like that. I like gliding style mounts. Flying.
Well, whenever flying's brought up, I always think of Classic, and very specifically, like there were interactions on my server early on, because obviously a lot of servers died. Mine did too, like population wise, but there were choke points at like exiting Kargath. Like you actually had to think about the map and like going through areas. There would be ambushes waiting at Kargath to gank you as you went through that tunnel from Kargath to Searing Gorge.
Never forget.
And well, yeah, that I don't think camping fight points on a dominant server is the best thing. But
dude, we were on we were doing DM jump runs during it, and it would literally take us 45 minutes to an hour to get into Dire Maul, because in the hallways they just had packs of 5, just
ambush
like,
squads. Yeah,
they would kill you 2-3 times, and then you'd get far enough for them to trade you on to the next pack that would farm you for your honor. It was awful. It was awful, but we were tenacious and we got through it. But
the thing is, I'm just the thing that you hadn't considered, the solution to that you hadn't considered is just be a part of the gang squad. That's literally
go horde.
You hadn't thought of that until now, but it's just do the killing. No. Get your alliance buddies together. Just murder all of them. That's the solution.
As Fury, or pay 50 gold to respec constantly. Like dual spec would have made open world PvP so much better for me. In like, I would have been having a blast rolling an arms spec on my way to the dungeon. Oof, it would have been good. I
agree with that. It should have been more accessible to have separate specs for sure. There's some arguments to be made. It's like, okay, well, this is a very effective gold sink, and it is, but it ends up with a little too much like anti-fun stuff going on. So I do think dual spec, but that's the thing. Those are a lot of things that you could bring to a vanilla plus situation, which
I think
would make a lot of sense. Like some of the class design. Change it. Well, that's a hard one. To be honest, it's a hard one. I would only want to touch the classes that are legitimately terrible.
Why don't you like mounts though at 20?
I like I like the the level. So
I just don't like Walking Simulator 2004. That's what I don't like.
I don't really have to deal with that because I'm a mage. So like it doesn't really change much for me. Obviously, mounting makes it easier for me because you can like do like better pulls, right? But it's probably mostly because I'm insulated from the effect of it because I just sit in one area and AoE farm, right? So like I don't actually have to run anywhere. So that's like definitely a bias that I have, that I'm like, well, it shouldn't be that way, like, because I was gonna be like, yeah, like imagine Ashenvale. Ashenvale's so cool, like running through it and getting to do this, that, and the other. And it's like, yeah, it is, but I never do that. I don't do that. That's not a thing that I've done in years. Like I don't run through Ashenvale like a pleb, right? Like that ain't me.
We've been doing hardcore, right? And me and Classic Go doing a duo. We're doing a warrior druid duo, and we get done with our parts in whatever that first leveling area is right out after Darnassus. I always forget the name of it, but
Teldrassil or Darkshore?
Darkshore, before you get to Ashenvale. But
Yep,
Darkshore.
So we get done with there, and it's like, all right, go to Red Ridge. And we're like, okay, well, let's go get on the boat. 45 minutes later, we are in our destination. It's just like, I don't know if it was actually that long. It might have been like a half an hour, but like, it's a long ass walk. And it's just like, that would have been kind of fun if we were on a mount. I don't like it. Just feels like in a fantasy game, level 20 characters would have mounts, right? Like
I like the pacing of it. I like the pacing of like those zones being like slow, and you really have to like trudge through it, because then you revisit those paths, right? Vanilla is really good at making you go back to the areas that you were before, and then you feel stronger, faster. Right, like I really like that as a progression system. So I think that it is really effective. But then again, also I teleport everywhere and I fucking don't, I don't run around. So again, I'm insulated from the actual effect of it. It's easy for me to be a purist when I'm like, well, yeah, everyone should just walk, fuck it, like. Well, obviously, flying does suck for the reason that Zatar was pointing out. Is because all those natural chokes are awesome, right? Like the PvP that you see in like Feralos, I think is a really good example. Not even the stuff at Dire Maul, but the stuff before Dire Maul. Like when we had those gang squads at the areas before Dire Maul, that was some of the most fun that I've ever had. Was like in the guerrilla jungles of Feralos, and then like kiting people to the Descent hill, right? Like because there was that one DHK at the woman who had the what was it? You guys know what I'm talking about? The what is it called?
Better think.
1 second, I'm about to.
Well, people just fly away. The main thing is anything you say, people just fly away now that there's flying mounts.
Yeah.
You can actually like sheep someone and then just literally fly away.
I guess
like if you can get out of combat, you just leave. And
I should clarify. When I said I liked flying specifically because of the way TBC and Wrath is designed. I did not like it when we went back to Azeroth and Cataclysm and were able to fly. You know what I mean? Like I liked it vanilla better. I liked that better. I just didn't see a way to make TBC not annoying as hell without. I think elevators would have killed me. I think it would have killed me.
No, elevators, bro. Fuck it. Just make elevators. We literally just make a bridge to
maybe
to
teleporters.
Teleporters and elevators.
I could maybe go with teleporters. But
all those lovely interactions that you get on the ground. Like have you ever like been fully chased through Felwood? Of course, everyone's been fully chased like the full duration of Felwood. That is such an iconic experience. Same thing in Ungoro. Everyone's been fully fucking chased out of Ungoro. That kind of like the gorilla, like, oh my god, like am I going left? Am I going right? Am I going around this tree? Am I going like which way am I going? Versus haha, I pressed the spacebar button and now I am invincible. Like it's just so fucking stupid. Yeah. Especially because they
even stupider druid flight form. They don't even have to get out of combat.
Yeah. Well, they have to get out of combat, I think.
Oh, they do
get out of combat.
But don't they just shift slow fall and they're able to get out?
They can jump off. So they jump off of something and then they can just get out of combat mid-fall and then hit it. So that's the real thing. But you do have to be out of combat. You can't just shift into mount in combat.
Night Elves can meld though, so you can almost essentially do it.
You can meld and then do it on Night Elf, but yeah, we wouldn't get that on Horde. But yeah, it's just the earlier versions of mount in TBC also were less terrible. And they gave us the last version of it. You could use a discombobulator array and you could dismount someone, which created a real sense of danger. You couldn't just be like, I'm going to AFK on my mount. Like you could be sheeped off your mount. You could be rocket helmeted. The X52 rocket helmet had a legitimately like important use in world PvP. And so you'd see people with this on, just like you'd see people with rocket helmets on in vanilla. And the use for it was you literally ran next to someone and you pressed your rocket helmet and it would dismount them. Right. And so you had to have slow falls on you. You had to think about it. You couldn't just willy-nilly fly around the world. People could stop you, and people were like, oh, I don't want to be sheeped off my mount, so they removed that, right, like fairly early on in TBC, because discombobulator
leave me allowed.
I don't think they were ever intended to dismount people to discombobulator array, and so they fixed it. But it was so interesting when it worked that way, because then there was at least some counterplay. You could stop someone from being. It's the same thing in with Dragonflight. Technically, there are ways of dismounting players. Like with your whirling surge or whatever.
Remember,
but like having a legitimate faculties to dismount. Right now, if you try and sheep someone on it, it's hilarious, and there's no reason for this. There's no in-game reason for it. There's no fucking functional shit going on with this. It says immune. It's not even like you get sheeped on your mount and you can't move around. It just says immune. You're just immune. Why? Because you're on a mount. Makes no fucking sense.
Remember back in original TBC. When at least this happened to me, we didn't have wireless headsets. Like I'd go AFK on my flying mount, and I'd come back after AFK and be like, well, how'd I die? And I still don't know to this day. Maybe they used an array. Maybe they I don't know. Like it was a throwback to like a different time. I came back many times and would be dead after going AFK on my mount in TBC.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to add with the mount at 40 versus 20, and then also what you said about your Darkshore journey. I think there's a couple things vanilla does really well. One of them is looking forward to things. I think if you had your mount at 20, not only would it have to be very cheap, because you'd have to buy it at 20, so it wasn't like a financial thing you're preparing for, but also I don't think you can really get that excited about a mount at 20, whereas at the point of 40, you feel like you should have had it by now. And you're like, oh my God, I finally have the mount. And that's like a really good feeling. And I don't think you get that at 20. And then the other thing is, I think the world does need to be very big. And I do think it needs to be a little bit slow to navigate, because there is a lot of advantage to knowing the boats, knowing the best way to navigate. I used to tell people like how to get certain places, like, oh, the fastest way would take this Zeppelin, then this flight point, or take 2 Zeppelins in a row, or take 2 boats in a row. I think that makes the world feel more real. And it also incentivizes mages and warlocks' abilities, right? Like, man, I really don't want to go this far. I should pay a mage. Like, how many of you guys have paid a mage for a port in Wrath of the Lich King? Because I don't think I have purchased a port in all of Wrath of the Lich King.
No, that's a good point. No, I haven't. Not once.
I purchased a lot. And then obviously in vanilla, I'm constantly buying ports because of how the world worked. And same thing with the warlock abilities. A warlock summoning you is huge, and it really makes their ability matter. Whereas again, in Wrath, obviously you're still getting warlock summons, but it's less of like, man, some people, they used to purchase summons to zones they hadn't been to yet just to get there faster, just to level faster, just save them time. And I think also like hitting a new flight point is kind of feels good in Classic. It's like, okay, I've hit this flight point. I've discovered this place. Now next time I can get back here quicker. Or you'd sometimes even discover flight points on purpose, even if you weren't going there. Like let's say you are questing in Shimmering Flats. Very common thing to do. You go down to Tenaris, you get the flight point, right? Even though you're not there yet, you're not level 40. You have a reason to go discover that. And yeah, that's those are some things I think they make the game feel more immersive.
And it makes it bigger because I mean, I could fly on my 310 mount. I could fly from one end of North Red to the other, and I think under 10 minutes. Like I think it might be 5. Like it's really fast.
In Classic, it takes 50. The longest flight points are 15 minutes. I actually looked this up recently because I claimed that there were 20-minute flight paths. I felt like.
I swear there is
double check.
on the left like continent for Alliance. Those flight paths take forever, but I don't know exactly.
Apparently, Undercity to Booty Bay is the longest flight path. But maybe it's possible it could get even longer if you have the messed up connections that screw up your flight route.
The longest one is it's Ashara to Gadget. It's Everlook to Gadget if you have fucked up flight paths, and it's like 25 minutes or something. Look, it's crazy.
Oh my god!
But again, if you go and get the flight pass, now you actually are flying through the world better.
Dude,
right?
that's why I was so pissed that the boosted characters got all flight paths. I was so mad about that. Like when they first got the boost going into
boost
TVC.
in general. I think the boost in general is the beginning of the end.
Yeah, I mean the game is just the game's fundamentally changed by the introduction of it. But yeah, like I think it comes down to when and what are you incentivizing certain behaviors from the players, and when are you making the fun thing the optimal thing? Because frequently the fun thing is the optimal thing in vanilla in terms of doing your 5-mans, right? In terms of like exploring the world, in terms of really knowing where things are and really being grounded in there, in terms of farming out in the world, so you get these emergent interactions between players with world PvP, etc. Right? Obviously, it causes some issues, but there's no server balance doesn't cause issues except for in world PvP realistically. So yes, world PvP causes server imbalances, but also server imbalances only matter if there's world PvP. Everything were a PvE server, the fucking server balance wouldn't really matter, except for when you're at caps and when your server is kind of low, right? So and a lot of it falls on Blizzard for having fucked up a lot of the shit early on in terms of how they were not curating servers effectively. Like they were not at all good at being custodians of those servers.
Not even good. They were negligent. Like straight up negligent.
Actively
they
terrible.
Weren't, yeah.
Dude, they destroyed my OK server white made. Like we were like 35-40% Alliance, and they're like, hey guys, the dead servers, just go ahead and transfer it anywhere you want. All of a sudden, we're 15% of the server, and most of the guilds are freaking leaving. We were the last raiding guild that was able to kill Black Temple that transferred off. Like, there's no way to recruit, nothing. Like, and they just straight up did that to us, and we had to pay for it. Still pissed about this.
Yep, they forced people off servers, and then you had to pay, which is insane. If people would,
there should have just been a cap. They could have had Alliance come in. All you got to do is just set it to like lock when it hits 50-50, and then you can go look at it and be like, okay, we'll open it for a second. Like, I don't know.
Well, especially because they did it now. It feels even worse because they weren't willing to do it back then, but now they have like server locks.
Yeah,
and it's like, well,
they weren't fully prepared, right? Blizzard did not, right? Like Activision Blizzard did not spend the money that it needed to have the right people at the helm in advance, so that they knew that these problems would arise. Because other companies have done it, but you see other companies do it, and they do it after the fact, right? Like when you don't get these solutions until you really see the problems. People have to, they have to see it fail first. And other people had seen it fail, and they would have those answers, but Blizzard wasn't willing to, or able to, or mostly willing to work with those people, right? So you didn't get to leverage the experience of the private servers and their developers on that team as readily as would have been beneficial to the project. And so you get these problems. But private servers didn't even like they just gave incentives. They didn't have locks or anything. They didn't have a dearth, they didn't have a breadth of players.
Which probably made it better. Like having 3,000 to 4,000 people on a server, that is healthy.
Right, like it was good, except for when eventually people started figuring it out. Right, on Nost it wasn't an issue, and then on K2 it wasn't an issue. But then like you look at K3, you look at Northdale, right? You look at servers after Elysium, and the slant towards Alliance becomes ever clearer. And if you relaunch Classic, it's going to be the same thing. People know better now. They're going to play Alliance way more often. So if you're not considering that fact, you're gonna botch some shit.
That's what Vanilla Plus needs right there. I've said it forever. Racials suck. Have racials be quest lines that are somewhat long. You can change them if you want, but you have to do the quest line over, and you can have whatever racial you freaking want, like for a certain amount, and then people can play what they want to play.
Here's my other hot take on this. Go the EverQuest 2 route. Give them that racial quest. Yes. Let them study under the gnomes of Gnomercon to get Escape Artist. Also, let them betray their faction. Let them literally go through a quest to join the opposite faction.
I've wanted that since 2005, dude.
Then you solve the issue of, okay, well, it's like, okay, well, we want a paladin really bad. Okay, well, we give them both paladins. We implement blood elves. We do this. No. Don't need to do that. Nope. You just have people betray their fact because it's in the game already. Like it literally is in the history of Warcraft. There are trolls and there are orcs who have fucking worked for the Alliance before. It's not as monolithic. Let it be more interesting. Let it be more interesting in that way, and it'll balance the game in ways that will still make it approachable, right?
I've always thought raids should be both. Like the lore of the game has Alliance and Horde teaming up to beat the big bag every time.
Literally an AQ. Yeah, you're not wrong. And the fact that we can't communicate across factions anyway makes no sense. Common is common. Everyone speaks the same language, right? Like there's it's not right. Like what is it that everyone on the Horde speaks Orcish, but that's not actually true. The Forsaken don't randomly speak Orcish. They speak Common, as does literally every person, right? Like.
Yeah,
in the Warcraft universe. So
every person in the movie, in all the cinematics, like
they can all communicate, and they're not like they're not specifically diplomats.
I think they did that in the beginning for PvP purposes, and just not to have crazy back and forths between people. But I could be wrong about that. But that seems why they would do that in the beginning.
Sure, but it doesn't, like, people already have, like, if you want to back and forth, you can find that fucker, and you can
even back in 2004, because what it turned into, people would go to the Blizzard forums to their server and be like talking shit to so and so who just killed them in freaking Western Plaguelands. Like it was a shit show in those Discords back in the day. So. Do you think the state is bad? I mean, we're kind of coming up here on time. Do you think the state is bad? I'm having a blast, and everybody keeps telling me that Wrath sucks now, and I'm like, oh, weird. I'm having a good time.
Here's an offensive way that I always phrase this to people. If I came over to your house and I convinced you to do, a whole bunch of heroin, you'd probably have a good time. Would it be good though? Probably not. Right? So. Right, like that's and that could be an offensive example, but it really goes for anything. Things can be fun even though they're shitty, right? Like I used to love playing, games that most of the games that I really, really, really love, I think are good games, but there are certain games that I really like playing that are shit. Like Atlas, for instance. Atlas, you guys know Atlas is from the people who made Ark, like the pirate Ark game. Terrible game, awful game.
I like Sea of Thieves.
Much fun on launch. Insanely fun on launch. Loved that game on launch, but it was terrible. It was legitimately a bad game. It had some promise to it, and that's really what kept it good. But it was really the people that were there. And I still think for me, the thing about WoW right now is it's the people. It almost always is. It's the people that you're playing with. It's not that it's the best version of the game. I think vanilla is an exception where vanilla is just so good that it really gets people involved and on the same page and sort of engrossed. And I think people played back in the day. They played TBC and Wrath more how we played vanilla. People were more in the world, they were more gathering, they were doing more of these things. So the game had that longevity and it really roped people in because you were doing all those other things. We didn't play it in a different way.
Well, I will say one thing though.
Go ahead.
Like, because this kind of bugged me at the end of both vanilla and TBC, and starting to bug me now. People are like, nobody's in the open world. But I point out, that's not Classic's problem. That was a problem back in the day. That was how it was in vanilla. First time a round, like the second half of the game, the open world was very empty. And same with TBC. It's same with Wrath. Like, it's just like, there's no incentive to go out there. I don't think that's a Classic problem. I think that's a problem with the game, the way it was made back then, you know, like, and it's just so happens that vanilla had a lot more reasons to go back into the world. Things we've brought up, gold being much more necessary, etc., finding different farm spots that no one's at, like yada yada yada.
Well, I mean, is it true for you guys? Because this is true for me. If I had a different game to play, if I had a game that was comparable to World of Warcraft, if I had an MMO that I could play that weren't dog shit, I would play it. Right, like I would play it, and the only reason why I continue to play WoW is because I lead a guild, and the only reason why I still lead that guild with, you know, the other people that run it with me is because I want a guild and a group and a community for when those better games come out. And so yeah, I enjoy Wrath. I enjoy it. I think it's bad. I enjoy it. I try to enjoy everything, right? Like me cleaning, you know, like me wiping down the kitchen sink. That's not fun. Like, I don't think that's like a good thing to be doing. Probably good, but like it's not like, oh my god, wow, can't wait
enjoyable
to clean the kitchen. But I enjoy that still, right? I try to enjoy everything that I do, right? Even if it's a little, you know, sometimes, you know, when we have roster meetings until 7:00 in the morning because we're trying to fill our fucking 5 raids full of people and do whatever roster fucking gymnastics, roster Tetris ass shit that we have to do up until 8:00 in the morning, right? Like, awful, but I enjoy it. Right, like because you gotta enjoy the little things like that. But is the game good? I mean, I think if you ask most people, the reason why they play is because their friends still play and they like playing games with their friends.
I think that's a really good point.
That's the biggest reason. And people get into the game because it's so good in vanilla. And back in the day, it was so good in vanilla and TBC and Wrath. Right, it was just such a great game. And then people were in these social circles and they like that sense of community, because I think that in a lot of places in the Western world, it's really hard to find community, and gamers have found that with each other in games like this. And so I think that that's a very hard thing to trade. I wouldn't trade my friends online for most things.
That's
right?
a good point. I mean, that's why I still run in the casual guild. Like or the casual run. Like, I have fun progressing with these guys and gals. You know what I mean? Like, so I think you're exactly right.
I think that's part of the allure of WoW since the, you know, inception of it was the community aspect, right? And whether your community is on Discord, in your guild, you know, whatever it is, like, you still have that community feel. And I think for me, I guess, redoing Classic from where it was originally, you definitely see why these things were implemented, right? Because so many people came in to Classic WoW saying, no changes, absolutely not, don't do this, right? And then the longer it went on, it was like, oh no, we need this. Yeah, we can do some changes. Like, let's do the good changes, right?
I have been hashtag some changes from day one. Just, I want to set that on every podcast I'm ever on, and people talk about no changes. I was vehemently against that from the start, and people were dumb to think that from the start. Anyway, I have to have my old man take on that.
No, I agree. And I think I was never the no changes crowd, but there were a lot of people that were. And I think,
I was some changes. I wanted dual spec from day one. I think I said it on episode 1 of this show.
Based. Yeah. Unbelievably based.
It would have made phase 2 so much fun.
Well, if it was fun, you just had to, here's the thing, just be rich, right? Have you just considered being rich?
The whole thing, though, is I'm trying to get to Dire Mall East to do jump runs. I can't do those as ARBs, as PvP ARBs, you know what I mean? Like, I need to respec once I get into the dungeon.
But here's the thing, right? Don't do jump runs. Go to Crater, farm skins.
I know, but like it was such
You
good money.
have to be arms to farm skins, bro. But most servers didn't have good Devil Star Mafias anyway. Like they didn't have good creator control, so it was less money than jump runs. For a lot of people, it was. So it wouldn't even make sense to do what I said. And I think that comes back to incentives, right? It's always about incentives. I think jump runs are fucking terrible for the game, honestly. I think they're really bad. Like I think sequestering people in instances to farm is a dog shit fucking solution.
And you had to be really good to do it too. So it definitely gatekeeped a lot of people. And we had a pain in the ass doing it because she was a priest.
I think it was
and not a paladin.
I think it was less of a problem when there actually was that skill deficit. I think that you have things like the mage farming later on as it got further and further into the expansion, right? The thing like Zul'Farrak was far of a bigger issue initially before they nerfed it than what's it called? Than jump runs. Because ZF, you could it was brain dead, right? Like it was just easy. You just did reset tricks with it, and then you just killed everything, and you just loot raw gold. You weren't even looting resources, right? Because like at least with that, you were looting resources, which would be determined, like the price would be determined ultimately, like by the availability of gold. They were just introducing raw gold into the economy by farming fucking mage weave cloth and grays. Like that was really bad, and it was just sequester. People were just in there for hours and hours and hours, and you had these streamers. What were they doing for the whole fucking day? They weren't world PvPing. They were sitting in Zul'Farrak, and I hated that.
Yeah,
awful.
Well, I guess my question though would be, is if we're not enjoying Wrath, which I am, I enjoy Wrath. I don't do much in Wrath right now, but I am enjoying it, right? But I think it's unreasonable for us to think that one game should cover all aspects of our enjoyment at all times, right?
It can.
But I don't know that that's the best route, right?
I don't know if it's healthy. I think raid logging at times is healthy.
I would rather have lulls in a game where I'm still enjoying the base content of raiding, but I enjoy raiding, right? But where I'm still enjoying that maybe one night a week. And I have this extra time to explore what else is out there in these other games that I want to play, right? And if I were to have to get on and, do all of these other things like farm in the world and all of that, like that is not enjoyable to me. That is like work to me.
Yeah, that's right? Why we used to watch shows while we did either jump runs or Mordon runs. Like we would watch a show like while we did that, right? Like it wasn't like something like that. It wasn't
in and of itself enjoyable. Now it
might have been more exciting though if all of these dungeons were open world and not instanced though too. Like the way Ultima Online was, like you'd be going through a dungeon and be like, "Oh, dude, here, are we gonna fight?"
Yeah, that would have just made us quit in phase 2, though. Let's be real.
Oh yeah, we would have been but you have to have the right amount of players for the right amount of like landscape too. Like that's a big thing. We had way too many. Like Whitemane was like 12,000 people on a vanilla server. It was nuts.
Yeah, no, it creates certain difficulties when you go that route, and obviously there are solutions to it though. And the thing that I've always harped on was there is no offering for world PvP players. There is no offering for like people who want an Ultima Online style game, and a lot of people still want it. Like that's what I want. I want a world PvP game, and those kinds of games. You're right. You can't play them casually, right? You really can't. You have to be all in on them, and I like that. I really really enjoy that. But I just sit around. I make sure
Online.
I make sure things are taken care of where I'm living, and I make sure that there's I cook and I clean for the house, and then I play games, right? And and I'll do a little construction work when we need help, and I'll help the contractors with stuff, and then I play games, right? So I want the games to fulfill a role that a lot of people don't want them to fulfill. Like people like the raid log, and I don't think they're wrong for it. But the people who want the vanilla style, the classic everything, where it's like you have to you're in and you're you're going to the Devil Store, you're going to Ungoro to farm Devil Store, or you're battling people for RTVs, and you're PvPing, and if say BRD was an instance, you're just constantly on all the time. It's not oh okay, I'm just gonna do my little 5-man with my little group and we just have to worry about the PvE. No, it's constantly everywhere is always in danger. I really really love that, but I think that you're right. The vast majority of players don't want that. That's a very niche thing. That's an extremely niche thing. It's like an old guard MMO desire that doesn't really exist for a lot of people anymore. So,
yeah, to answer for me on if I'm enjoying the game, I just checked my /played because I was kind of curious. I have 1/5 the time played that I had in TBC on my main, and we're kind of probably halfway in. So maybe safe to say I've played about half as much as TBC, and I actually played vanilla more than TBC. So it's just in terms of how much I'm playing the game, I'm just playing the game a lot less. Also, I'm multi-classed in TBC. I only really play one character in Wrath. So the true number is probably I probably played like 4 times more in TBC. So I'm just on the game much less. And this is definitely the closest I have been to quitting. And like North said, the only reason is because I run a guild. And if I quit, the guild will disband. Just the reality. So I'm trying to make it through to ICC. I don't know if I'll make it. There's no way on this planet. We are doing Ruby Sanctum, though. That's not happening. Maybe it'll be one Lich King and out. Who knows? But trying to make it to ICC in general. But yeah, it's definitely the social reason keeping me playing. And it's just really hard to not look at TBC or vanilla and be like, man, I just have more fun playing the game then.
See, my /played in vanilla is completely wrong. I can't look at it because I literally would stay with Mel's because I would have us both logged in 6 hours before we played because of the queues. So we'd be logged in while I'm just doing other work and stuff, and just every 25 minutes my alarm would go off, Alt F4, log back in on character. Like rinse, repeat. Like
it's the only way we could raid.
Yeah, or else we wouldn't have got in for raid. So yeah, so I don't know if you had the same thing with yours there, but it sucks because it's just not accurate for me.
Yeah, I didn't look at my classic character because it's on a different account that I let deactivate. But my TBC character, I did have some queues, but my Wrath character also had some queues on Benediction. So I think it's probably somewhat close, but haven't had any queues since phase 1 in Wrath. And I think there was only a little bit of queuing in TBC. So probably similar.
Yeah. I think Classic was where it was really inflated for us, at least. Just definitely. A lot. But
yeah, I guess I'm really only having fun in raids at the moment. But before Diablo and before, I always take a little raid loggy break right before the new content comes out for a few weeks. But I was doing dailies but at the same time, I was talking to stream most of the time. Do I know if I would have been doing that if I wasn't streaming? I'm thinking I probably wouldn't have.
No. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's also subjective too. Like the main reason I'm playing Wrath a lot less is I just don't have a character I think is fun, because in TBC I played a Prot Warrior and I liked that Prot Warrior was hard though. I don't think they're hard to play anymore. Like in TBC, Prot Warrior was like the hardest thing you could be doing. Every stat
I think
on
it's
a piece
harder.
Of gear,
I think it's harder than
raid
the other
content,
tanks now.
The raid content is harder, and the reason you say it's harder is just because they die easier. It's not that they have higher. Like I would say, Blood Death Knight takes more skill to play perfectly.
You think so?
Than
Really?
a warrior.
I have no
because
idea.
They have.
Blood DK
for example,
actually involves some, like its rotation is relatively challenging because it has to optimize certain, like icy touch uptime nonsense.
I've rated on both. Yeah, you basically, you kind of sometimes, like let's say something really hard is hitting you. As a DK, you stop pressing your buttons, you wait to take damage, and then you death strike. But if you do that too much, you're going to start losing threat. So it's like a balance between reactively healing and Prot Warrior kind of just presses their rotation and then plans defensives. That's kind of it. Your rotation kind of sorts itself out.
Lots of planning defensives, just lots of buttons to hit in general.
But yeah, DKs, for example, though, their defensives cost resources, whereas the Warrior, all of their defensives cost nothing. Like Shield Wall and Last Stand, you just press them. Shield Block, you just press them.
What about the healing
DK,
one? The healing one costs some rage, doesn't it?
Sure, but that one's kind of very minor. But like a DK, for example, could mess up and not have enough runic power to press wall, and they just die, or they might not have a rune for their heal, or their Last Stand takes a rune.
And if you're taking hits as a warrior, you're basically full rage. Like I don't even have like I don't even have heroic strike or cleave on my bars. I just have 2 revenge buttons, and one has cleave in it and one has heroic strike in it, and I just basically am just hitting it at all times.
But your threat is good, right? You're probably not freaking out about
amazing
threat ever.
Threat, yeah.
Imagine playing TBC and you're getting like, oh my God, they're chasing you. Like in every single fight, you're customizing your gear set because you need like, oh,
that part's kind of cool.
Last week somebody almost caught me on threat, so I'm putting in more threat gear. Oh, last week I almost died, putting on more defensive gear. I was always measuring it and changing it, and it was the most fun I've ever had theory crafting.
In TBC on the Warrior, TBC, right?
Yep. Yes, because you used every stat. Because threat was rough, you were looking for crit, resilience on some pieces, attack power. But then there'd be certain bosses, like Brutalis, for example. If you walked in with resilience gear and threat gear, you're just going to die. Your stats completely change based on if the boss dual wields or not, based on the boss's attack speed. So I just had so much fun theory crafting my character. The itemization was so much more intriguing to me because there wasn't such a big gap based on item level. Whereas now I can't find a class in Wrath that I want to throw myself into.
What are you trying to pick lately?
I played Blood DK. I tried to pick the hardest like tank I could. But I still find that I just basically gem stam, gear stam, and that's kind of it. That's kind of just correct.
You need more pumpers, bro. That's the real thing. Because threat's still like in our guild, threat is still challenging. Like if our tank is not getting tricks on the pull, and obviously sometimes you're gonna want tricks on like every warlock and the shadow priest just to get their the shadow word pain and the corruptions just rolling and fucking hitting real fucking hard. If he doesn't have that,
AOE.
he'll get owned.
Dude, tricks on pull is so huge. Like especially having the combat rogue do it. Like at the start of a boss, like I basically tricks killing spree them like so much starting threat, which is just huge. And then like tricks like on big packs, tricks fan, and then go into doing whatever I was gonna do. But like it just helps so much. I don't know. I love tricks, but yeah, I have a major problem on the Warrior on big packs. Like, and then if I'm taking with a freaking pally, I want to pull my freaking hair out because they have taunt in their freaking rotation, and it just drives me nuts. I'm like, dude, I need to get hit to have rage, and it's just taunting everything constantly.
Yeah, trash threat is mostly not you, to be honest. It's kind of a sad feeling about playing a tank. Well, especially because I play Blood DK. And their AoE threat is horrible. So I'm just basically instructing other people to press tricks and MD for threat. And if they don't, people just start dying. It's one of the most frustrating things about trash. And
and then everybody thinks, oh, the tank can't do what they're doing. It's like, no, I just can't do it. Like I'm trying my hardest.
Well, if you're playing a Blood DK, there's literally no shot that you keep threat on an AoE pack without tricks. It's just impossible. If you're playing Paladin, though, obviously you can, but Paladin has his own issues. 3
to 4 people on the Warrior, like fine. And like a big help on the Warrior tank is your AoE stun. Like you go in there, you stomp, thunderclap, or whatever it is, and then hit that AoE stun, and then boom, you can just kind of tab around, like put some cleaves out. Like you can do a lot in that short time before the mobs start running off. But like it's a big pain, just anything over 4 mobs, for me at least.
Yeah, no, it can be. Do you only play tanks?
I've tried other classes. Basically, I have a hard time playing DPS in raid because, kind of like I mentioned before, I'm not naturally like the biggest raider. So when I do raid, I need to play something that feels very important and feels like I'm impacting the success of every pull. And I think that as a DPS, that is very hard to consistently do across the entire raid. So I kind of exclusively play tank and healer. I do think Holy Priest is fun, but kind of just had to play tank, I guess, for guild. And then also, if I play Holy Priest, they're usually, unless you kind of warp the guild around the Holy Priest, they're usually getting told to off-spec pretty frequently. It's just unfortunate that Disc and HPAL are essential, and they would be extra if you don't design the guild around them. I still think Holy Priest can be very strong, but yeah, I didn't want to play Shadow. But yeah, TBC, I just really liked my warrior, and it's just hard to compete. I knew it was happening too. I was so sad when pre-patch hit because my warrior was much stronger, it did much more damage, but it wasn't the same. I liked the puzzle pieces and the challenge of playing it in TBC.
I mean, you did have some fun with the revenge spec at the beginning. I mean, you were one of the first videos that I saw.
I found the same thing about Arcane realistically in TBC, right? Like Arcane, I think feels way better because you're playing this mini game of, and there's way more skill expression, I think, as a result in a lot of fights because the fights are longer, and you're trying to do your best to like keep a 4-stack Arcane Blast the entire time. Like you just want to pump to the boss. So you're calling innervates, you're getting mana tides, you're getting every resource that you possibly can to do this damage. Whereas now, because you have the auto reset on the missiles and it's barely any more damage to actually, to missile in most situations, you're kind of just like looking to optimize around certain CDs. But they changed enough stuff where it's like arcane powers on such a low cooldown now that fitting in the various cooldowns feels fun and clever, and you get veins with the spec. You got veins with the spec in TBC as well, but it still feels like there's enough interesting stuff to do. You have Incanter's Absorption, which really helps because Incanter's is just such a fun spell. So there's still, I'm trying to say that I was gonna try and say that I found a way to enjoy it, but they legitimately added things to it. Yeah, they simplified some stuff that I didn't like, but they also added to it. So it's definitely not the same as Prot Warrior if they actually just straight up simplified it. I think it's cool, the vigilance thing though. I think that vigilance resets taunt. I think there's a lot of room for skill expression there on things like tanking, being a Prot Warrior on like a noob heroic. I think it's actually very cool. Like if you're the ad tank, because you get some skill expression there.
I switched recently. I told like a few weeks back, I was like I think I'm griefing the raid guys. Like I'm just gonna go to off tank, which sucks because going to off tank now I'm DPSing, but like I'm gonna be getting the tank gear later. I'm going to be like on the bottom of the totem pole for DPS gear. Like it's kind of a crappy spot I never wanted to be in, but I'm having a good time doing it. Like I could just get a freaking weapon to know if it's, I suck or if it's just my weapons that suck, but something sucks on Fury. And I think it's my 224 weapons. Yeah.
224.
Well, I've got one 224 and one 238 because I just started making the set because I was the main tank. I didn't build a set. I kept some stuff in the bank, right? But like I wasn't really I wasn't looking at most gear because I was going to pull the next pack, so I wasn't rolling on anything. Like I didn't know what I needed, yada yada. So when something was going to get disenchanted, I was like, give it to me.
Fury is also harder than it has been.
It's actually really fun though. Like it's kind of like a little bit of whack-a-mole stuff going on, and I'm having a good time. I just wish I could have some. And then today I made the stupidest mistake. Spent $45K on what I thought was a two-hand.
Oh God!
It was Caress and not the freaking two-hander off Yogg. And I equipped it before realizing it. I couldn't. And the worst part, like, isn't even really the gold. The worst part is I took it from a friend who runs with us in all the different DKPs, and that just means it's something he's going to have to like farm, or like, it's something that he doesn't get and I don't even know what I'm going to use it for. Maybe trash taking. Like
it would make your cleave hit harder. That's pretty much it.
Yeah. Well, I've got Berserker on it too. So it's just another big weapon to mess around with on different fights. So like it might be kind of cool, but at the same time, it's just like, oh, I took that from him. I'm so sorry. Like it sucks. But that would have been $180. That would have been $180 in WoW tokens.
I
could have subbed for 9 months.
$45K on the other item too.
I just wanted to pump tonight in Old War, and that's like, I don't know. It was like a fourth of my gold though, so it's not like it is substantial. It's a stupid bonehead mistake.
I spent, I think, because our guild does we try and do a clever thing. We transferred to Aranicus in phase 2 because we thought that we could run the GDKP market here, and we effectively do. Like we have 3 GDKPs. We used to have a shit ton of 10-man GDKPs as well. and we take a massive cut from this market because like a lot of people wouldn't be able. There's like one other GDKP that can clear hard modes, and we were doing it on week 3, and they were doing it like they've only recently been able to clear everything in one night.
Yeah, that's huge. That's why I go with these GDKPs.
Yeah, and so we've been able to monopolize like a lot of stuff here. So we take an MC, we take like I think we take a 30% cut, like just straight up to the guild. We take a 30% cut, and people are just fine with that. And we use that to fund it. And so like people really get cuts from us because we will fund all of that 30% cut that basically just goes back into the run, right? Like because we're spending money on our raiders, and so we split as aggressively as possible. And then like my flare cost us, I think it cost us over gold cap. It was like 240,000.
Jeez.
Like we had a conductive seal that went for 400k. Like we you know we want to get our raiders the gear, and we had all this gold, and we're sitting probably on like over 1 million gold right now, and we're trying not to spend too much as the phase ends out because we're making very little now because there's you know like people you know there's not a lot of stuff. If something goes for 20 25 40k, it's crazy, but at the start things were going for over 200k regularly. We had over 1 million pots like pretty much every week in different GDKPs every week, so we were making a shit ton of gold. We were spending a shit ton of gold, and so everyone was kind of you know, it was a good ecosystem.
Yeah, I guess I should say
cost, like crazy, but like my gear, like I think the guild spent like over like 700,000 gold in the gear that I currently own, and I'm still not BIS. I'm the loot officer in the guild, right? We have been splitting since week 3. We've been killing Algalon. I have not rotted a single Algalon. I'm still missing 2 BIS pieces from Algalon. I still do not have gloves, and I do not have Cosmos.
Damn.
Like after this, I don't have a scale. I don't have Cosmos. I don't have Pharaohs. And it's literally, I've been in my own raid where every single piece of gear that's dropped, I've immediately purchased for myself. And I still do not have bits.
Casters were at a bad spot. See, I just need comets to be fully rogue bist, but that's because 9 items of mine come from 10 man. But, I should clarify though. I guess it was only 30k because the payout was almost 15k. So
not bad.
Oh, you're justifying the price. Huh?
No, it's a worthless freaking thing. I'm a freaking moron. Like it's just, and it hurts. But you know what?
The
like,
GDKP thing, people say that they're like, well, like if you count the cut, it wasn't that bad.
It wasn't so bad, guys.
We also, it was really funny. The GDKPs that we started, the other mage in the guild, because we have like 2 main mages in the guild. It's me and this other officer. His name is Firemath. And he was the one who like did the organizing at the start to like put it together, like what the cuts would be, what the split would be, et cetera, et cetera. And he at the very start knew that he was going to be taking all the PIs, he was taking the innervates, et cetera, on his character. So he was like, oh, we're going to have it so that the top DPS has a tank cut. 3 tank cuts, and that started at the beginning. So when you had these raids, when we were having 1 million pots, even with the, you know, like the 30% taken out, you know, if you get a top DPS cut, your cut is suddenly like 40,000 gold, which is just wild.
Crazy.
For 2 hours of raiding, you're getting 40,000 gold. When you translate that into tokens, right, you're getting what, 8 months of game time for 2 hours. It's just wild.
Yeah, it's crazy. Like, yeah, it is wild.
On day 1 too. I bought tokens on day 1 for 10k each because I thought that because on the support article it said you could trade it for Blizzard balance, and I was like, okay, if you can trade it for Blizzard balance, even though I can't do that right now, I buy one, I see that I can't do that. Clearly they're going to implement it because this is going to tank to 5k if it doesn't. And so I purchased like enough to go to the year's end because I was like, I'm going to purchase a couple and I'm going to see because it'll go up if balance is there, and if it's not, it'll fucking tank. And then it tanked, and I was like, oh fuck, because they I bought a fair few on day 1. I don't regret it though, because the support article literally that it linked to said you can trade this for balance.
I just had to buy them to see how they worked. I bought 2 for money, and then I bought 1 from the auction house. I just needed to talk about it on the show, and my bumper was serious. Like I did not understand the WoW tokens, so I had to like learn about it before I could give an opinion on it, rather than just parrot other people saying it's good or bad, right? Mm-hmm. But guys, I got a raid here in like 15 minutes or so, so we got to close out the show. Is there anything last statement anybody wants to make about Wrath? About anything? Zatar's frozen.
Bring back Classic Plus. Oh, can you hear me?
I can hear you. You're just like,
my face froze.
For a freeze face, it's actually pretty dang good. Like it got you at a good light. Usually freeze faces are bad.
My finger's not in my nose.
Yeah, usually freeze faces are really bad. But this is actually a good one. This is like a male model shot. This is blue steel.
People do call me that.
There you go.
All right, well, let's go ahead and start ending out the show. Try to do this as quick as possible. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter at WC Reloaded. You can follow the Mash Those Buttons Network at the Mash Network. If you want to send us an email, send it to wcrpodcast@gmail.com. If you want to join the Discord, it's discord.me/Warcraft Reloaded. If you want to help us out in any way, Patreon, whatever, go to warcraftreloaded.com. You can get all the links there. Thank you guys. And Zatar, well, you're back. Where can we find you?
Twitch.tv/Zatar_wow. And then I'm also Zatar on YouTube, Zatar Wow. So just Google Zatar Wow and you'll find me.
All right, perfect. And North, what about you?
You can find me everywhere at North the Mage. You want to follow me on Twitter? You want to follow me on Twitch? I'm going to start streaming again. Is what I always say that. I'm like,
and you do it for like a day.
And I do for like 2 weeks, and it'll be like one day, and then I'll be like, yeah, I love streaming, and then I'll stream for like 2 weeks, and then I'll be like, It's always like problem. So like I'll have a technical problem with my stream, and then I'll just be like, I cannot be fucked to fix my computer. Like I've been having problems for like months now, so that's kind of they're mostly fixed. I need to fix my webcam. I've also been afraid of the webcam for a really long time because I let myself go there for a while, and I'm back to like 250 pounds. So I'm a normal looking human being again. So maybe I'll don the Mage hat and turn on the webcam. But I'm North the Mage and everything, on Twitch, on Discord, on Twitter. It's it's North the Mage. So if you want to find me, that's where I am.
Absolute legend. Mel, where can we find you?
You can find me in the show, or you can find me in the Discord. I don't stream or do anything else.
She's often on my stream. We've been struggle bus streaming Diablo. We didn't stream last night because we just couldn't be bothered, but we do it a lot. Mm-hmm. All right, and you can find me on Twitter at Blazin_Bob. That's BLAZZIN_BOB, or this show live and me streaming quite a bit. Twitch.tv/BlazinBob. Let's get out of here, guys. Thank you guys.
Bye.
See you guys next week. We out.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you very much for checking out Warcraft Reloaded Podcast. Make sure to like and subscribe and hit that bell so you don't miss any future content.